I thought we had it all. 28 years of marriage, 3 beautiful children, and a future we built together. But the moment she left for that 6-month training course, everything changed. I knew something was wrong when her calls grew cold, her words distant. Then I discovered the truth. A younger man, a secret life, and a betrayal that cut deeper than any wound. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a man with nothing left to lose. And when she came home, I had a plan that would make her regret every single lie. This is my story. Chapter 1, Penelope, or Penny, as I always call her, and I have been married for 28 years. This year marked a change for us. It was the year our youngest child started college. We had just dropped her off, and now we were officially empty nesters. I wanted to take this chance to bring back some of the love that had faded over the years. With our busy lives, we hadn't had much energy or privacy. We live in a small house with thin walls, not a big place with house staff. I thought everything was set for my plan. As soon as we got back home, I took Penny upstairs, even though she said, "Mike, my back is sore from the trip," and "Let me shower first." I wanted to be close to her. I hoped that this moment would be a good start for us. After all this time, I still loved Penny deeply and felt a strong connection to her. At 48, she still looked great. After we had shared some tender moments together, we both relaxed for a while to catch our breath. I hoped to recover quickly so we could enjoy more time together. I wanted to show her that our relationship could be exciting now that we had the house to ourselves. I wanted her to feel as close to me as she did when we first became a couple. However, Penny had other things on her mind and took this moment to talk about our future. Penny is a nurse. She started her training as a nurse when we first met. After taking time off to have children and dealing with the challenges of raising them, she has mostly worked as a general nurse. Over the years, she often noticed younger nurses coming into the job, fresh out of school. They would take a few courses and quickly get promoted, sometimes even being promoted ahead of her. Saying she was upset about it was like saying the Pope was just a little bit Catholic. After a really special moment together, I learned about a plan she had thought through carefully. Penny explained that there was a serious lack of pediatric nurses at her hospital. If she took a tough training course that lasted 6 months, she would have a good chance to stay at her hospital. She also knew that the head nurse in the other hospital's pediatric department would be retiring in 2 years, and she wanted that job. If everything went as planned, Penny would be in a perfect spot to take over from the matron of her current hospital when that person retired in 5 years. Penny had her heart set on a big prize. She had looked into it and discovered that she could get paid while training for 6 months. This way, she wouldn't make things hard for our finances. Plus, her better salary would help us reach our goal of retiring at 60 with enough money saved up. I gazed at Penny, amazed at this new drive within her. It felt like I was seeing her in a different light, both thrilling and a little scary. I realized that my wife still knew how to surprise me, and sometimes that surprised me. As I considered how much thought she had put into this, I wondered why this was the first time I was hearing about it. Why hadn't she asked for my opinion or help? Why had she kept her hopes and plans to herself? I had always supported her. Even with a bit of worry starting to grow in my stomach, I was leaning toward helping her with this dream. That is, until I found out the reason she had held back. Penny found a course that she really wanted to take, but it was in another state, 1 hour away by plane, and it would cost $250 to fly there. 6 months is a long time, Penny. Is there nowhere closer? Can't they do it online? I asked. No, they don't have online classes, and 6 months isn't that long. It will go by quickly. During hard times, couples manage just fine with letters. We can handle you flying up once a month, can't we? I stayed quiet, thinking about what to say. Before I could express my worries or ask more questions, Penny exclaimed, "Mike, stop being so narrow-minded." That really upset me. I've never been narrow-minded with her or our daughters. I was so taken aback that I almost missed what she said next. If this was about you and your job, everyone would expect me to support you. But because I'm a woman, you think I'm being selfish for wanting your support for my goals. Selfish? When did I even get a chance to say anything? I barely had time to speak. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Getting upset wouldn't help either of us. Pen, I'm not being selfish, and I'm not saying you are either. I'm just trying to understand everything. You have clearly thought this through a lot, but I've only had 10 minutes to think about it. Penny quickly looked sorry for how she spoke. Her tone softened as she explained more. By living in the student nurse housing and working at the teaching hospital, we could save our retirement money. Penny flying home in 6 months didn't seem like a good idea considering how busy she would be. But it felt possible for me to visit her every month or so for the weekend. It all sounded reasonable at first. Still, I realized later that the difference between my plans and Penny's made me a bit unsure. When Penny playfully leaned closer to me, it was like a signal that any doubts I had faded away. Ask any guy who hasn't had much attention. They'll agree to almost anything in those moments. I agreed to have Penny join the next course. The next surprise hit me when she decided to join the course that started the following week. Afterward, all my carefully thought-out questions didn't matter. I had already said yes, right? I felt a bit taken advantage of. Penny left in a hurry, excited like a kid going off to their first camp. She was so happy that she nearly forgot to say goodbye. I'm a bit ashamed to admit that I had a hard time making a new schedule. For years, I didn't have to think about how to spend my free time. I often let Penny plan our social life. As long as she included my family in her plans, I was fine with her taking over that part of our life. I wasn't the only one like this. Many of the men I worked with were the same. Most evenings and weekends were filled with activities that Penny had organized for us, or with necessary chores like mowing the lawn, washing the car, and driving the kids to their sports events. Now, from the time I got home from work at 6 until 10 or 11 at night, I felt lonely and bored. I wasn't used to going out a lot since we had never really done that. But now there was no one to share a laugh with when the news showed yet another silly mistake by a politician. I missed simple moments like holding hands and watching our favorite shows together. I even missed giving Penny's feet a little massage. During the first week after Penny left, we talked every night for about 30 minutes. I have to say I was curious if she had thought about how much our phone bill would go up with all this chatting. I also felt a bit jealous. She seemed really busy and excited about her new adventure. She talked a lot about her experiences, and I didn't know many of the people she mentioned. It made me feel a little left out, like I didn't belong in this part of her life. Still, our conversations always ended on a sweet note and gave me some hope. Maybe being apart would make us appreciate each other more. When she came back, we could start fresh and work on our relationship. In the second week, our nightly calls that used to last 30 minutes were cut down to 20. Penny said she needed to study, and our talks were distracting her from her nursing work. That stung. I felt like I was bothering her. I always tried to end our calls nicely, but by the end of the week it felt uneven. Still, I wanted to be supportive, hiding my own sadness and loneliness. By the third week, she asked if we could only talk every other night. Strangely, she suggested that she should call me instead of me calling her. She thought this would help me not disturb her when she was busy. By the fourth week, I only got 2 calls from her. I tried to be understanding. She had a big assignment due and was working evening shifts. But it was tough for me. I was excited because I would be flying up to see her for the weekend. I missed her a lot. I missed the good times we had together. But things changed unexpectedly. I had to cancel my trip at the last minute because Penny told me there was a flu outbreak and the hospital was very busy. They needed all available hands at the teaching hospital. Still, that weekend brought something good. While I was getting gas, I ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in a long time. He and some of his friends played poker at a local pub every Saturday night. He invited me to join them. Since I was tired of feeling lonely and neglected by my wife, I decided to go. They were a nice group of guys, and I enjoyed their company. We had a few fun games in the back room, then went to the bar for some nice drinks. After years of having my social life filled with neighborhood cookouts, small local family restaurants, and events for kids, the pub was quite a surprise for me. I was surprised to see so many single women my age or a bit younger who confidently approached me and tried to engage in conversation. It's amusing how you forget these encounters happen in bars after being married for a while and focusing on family life. It took 3 Saturdays, and I'll admit some other nights when I noticed Penny wasn't calling, before I realized being approached became something usual and not just a coincidence. I asked my friend Jeff what was going on. Mike, you really have been away from this for a long time, haven't you? Don't you see that at our age, there are more single women than single men? What you're seeing are the women whose partners left them for younger companions. They are the ones who were overlooked. But why me? I asked. Listen, Mike, you've been married for so long that your self-esteem as a man is tied to what your wife thinks of you. Look at yourself in the mirror and then look around. You're more attractive than many, and since your job keeps you active, you're still fit. You don't have a partner beside you and you're not at home with kids. If you took off your wedding ring, you could find someone interested fairly quickly. You wouldn't even need to try hard. I glanced around and noticed some curious looks. Jeff saw where I was looking. I'm not trying to hurt Penny, Jeff. I understand that, but let's just imagine for this discussion that you are single. If I were you, I'd steer clear of the overly forward ones. They are dressed to impress tonight looking for companionship. I don't like to say it, but I think half of the people here are married and just looking for a quick connection. To be fair, the same might go for half the men here, too. Look at that table over there. Jeff pointed to a table with a woman in her 40s who seemed a bit down. She was with 5 friends. The woman who looks a little sad might have just been left for someone younger. She's out with her friends to lift her spirits. In a few weeks, she'll probably come back, trying to meet someone to regain her confidence and remind herself she still looks good. Or she might be seeking closure. If you want a casual connection, you could come back then. Or, if you wear your wedding ring, it might deter anyone interested. It all depends on what you're looking for. Jeff pointed to another table where 4 women around my age were laughing and having a good time. I noticed 2 of them wearing wedding rings while the others were not. As we observed, 3 of them glanced around the room. If I were single, that's where I'd go. They seem like friends enjoying a night out. 2 are married, but one still wants to have a good time. The other 2 are single, but they're not anxious about it. They might be open to opportunities if they arise, but they're not actively searching. At that moment, my phone beeped with a message from Penny. She expressed her apologies for being busy at work and unable to call. I tried to feel grateful for her text, but it was a challenge. As her calls and messages became less frequent while she was away, it was tough to maintain that gratitude. Still, at least she remembered to end her message with a quick, "Love you." That was better than what she wrote in her last 2 texts. I quickly replied, "I love you too," and then turned to Jeff to continue our conversation. "All right, I'll show you I'm right. Take off your ring and go to the part of the bar closest to that table to get a drink." I followed his advice. While I leaned against the bar, waiting for the bartender, I kept an eye on the scene. I hadn't been resting my arms on the bar for more than a minute when one of the married women stood up. She discreetly tucked her ring into her pocket and approached me, asking if she could buy me a drink. However, her enthusiasm faded when I mentioned I was married. I also pointed out that I had seen her take off her wedding ring, which caused her to blush slightly. The others at her table were watching her, and before she could return, one of the single women was already making her way over. She arrived just as the bartender was preparing my drink. After my drink was served, she placed her order. I looked back at their table and saw their drinks were at least half full, so I wasn't surprised when the woman next to me greeted me and struck up a conversation. A quick glance told me she wasn't quite my type, and I must have shown that in my demeanor because she soon returned to her table with a round of drinks. I went back to sipping my drink, waiting for Jeff to return from the restroom so I could share just how right he was. Then I heard a soft, "Hi," from behind me. I turned to see another woman from the table looking at me with confidence. With what I knew about the single scene, I guessed she was trying to make a connection but would be fine if nothing developed. If I had been single, I would have found her appealing. It was hard to gauge her age. She could have been around my age or perhaps a few years younger. She was attractive and slim, exuding a healthy vibe. Her hair was a lovely honey blonde that curled softly around her face, complemented by a warm, genuine smile. I took a glance at her ring finger and noticed it was bare as well. I checked mine too. Because of my job, I usually only wore my ring when I went out, so my finger was bare as well. It felt right to offer to buy her a drink. "No thanks," she said, lifting her glass and gently moving it from side to side before taking a sip. She had a confident vibe that I found attractive. It was clear she was comfortable being herself. We started chatting easily about all sorts of topics. After a while, I realized I should be honest and told her that I was married but wasn't wearing my ring. I could have made up a story about where my ring was, but I felt the need to be truthful with Andrea, which was her name. She questioned me about my actions, which did seem a bit sneaky and wrong. "Hey, to be fair, one of your friends came up to me just a little while ago." She was so obvious that she didn't even try to hide it when she took off her rings and put them in her pocket. "That's Carol. She's not really my friend. I just met her tonight. She came with Sue, who is a good friend of mine. They work together. Honestly, I couldn't believe what I saw either." "You feel a bit sorry for her husband, right?" I agreed. "Just so you know, I didn't take off my rings because I want to flirt, but because I'm testing out my friend Jeff's idea about women our age going to bars." Andrea laughed a lot when I explained Jeff's ideas. She actually mostly agreed with him. The talk shifted to Penny. "My wife has been away for nearly 2 months on a 6-month training program out of state, and I hate to say it, but I feel a bit lost without her." "You must really miss her." I nodded. "Very much. She's busy with work and studying, so we don't get to talk much. That's why I ended up coming here. I'm tired of sitting here by myself and looking at the same 4 walls in our living room." "So you just want some company? No casual dates or anything like that?" I was a bit surprised by her direct questions. "No. I'm committed to one person. But that doesn't mean I can't enjoy spending time with a woman and having a good chat." Andrea seemed happy with my answer. "Great. Let's keep talking then." Talking to Andrea was really nice. She shared how much she and her husband had focused on their children over the years. Now that the kids were grown and gone, they felt like strangers to each other. They chose to part ways amicably 6 months ago. Andrea was enjoying her new freedom, but mentioned she was open to finding someone special if the right person came along. We talked for way over an hour. Eventually, I noticed her friends were getting ready to leave. I could see Andrea considering whether to stay or go, and in the end, she decided it was best to leave. I saw it as a good sign that she thought about staying. It meant she liked being around me since a deeper relationship wasn't an option. It felt nice, especially after how Penny had treated me. My phone calls with Penny became less and less frequent. Now we spoke for just 5 to 10 minutes twice a week. I started to relax more to keep myself from going crazy. I realized there was no point in getting upset. Penny just wasn't interested. When I brought up how our calls were getting shorter, she told me to stop acting like a baby and to stop making things hard for her with my complaints. Didn't she see that I was feeling the same way? Didn't she have enough to deal with already without my complaints? I tried to explain, but she didn't listen. As a result, I didn't hear from her for 5 days. I refused to let myself be unhappy. I was tired of feeling frustrated and helpless, just following Penny's wishes. So I started going to the bar a few times a week to talk to different people and be friendly. The next week, I couldn't visit Penny because she had schoolwork to do. That hurt a lot. We hadn't seen each other in 10 weeks. And now I felt like I didn't matter. She didn't seem to care about making time for me or for us. In our last 3 calls, she didn't even ask how I was doing. When she said she wasn't feeling well and didn't want to see me, I wasn't surprised. The next night, I decided to call her phone, even though I usually didn't. A friend of hers answered and told me Penny had taken some sleeping pills and was asleep. She left her phone with her friend so she could rest. Meanwhile, I was enjoying my social life. It was much better than sitting at home waiting for calls that never came. I felt lonely without phone calls that made me feel cared for. I joined the Thursday night dart competition because one of the teams had to replace a player who moved away. I had more fun at the Tuesday night trivia game than I ever expected. I met some new and interesting people, and I always made sure to tell the single women that I was married and not looking for trouble. I often ran into Andrea, who would come over to chat when she was out with her friends. She started spending time with one guy and told me he was interesting enough to think about being in a relationship with. However, that only lasted 2 weeks before he disappeared. She said he wanted more than she was ready for, so he moved on. She was okay with that. He didn't pass the serious test. We were careful not to talk about my relationship with Penny, and Andrea never shared her thoughts about Penny or her actions, which I appreciated. I was upset with my wife for ignoring me. We hadn't seen each other in 14 weeks, and our phone calls were short and rare. Even when we talked, I felt like I was bothering her. I knew she was busy. I understood she had a tough job while also studying. But did that mean I had to be pushed away, forgotten like an old shoe? Couldn't we have regular short talks and quick texts without it hurting her plans? The more time I spent with Andrea, the more I enjoyed her company. She was kind and friendly. She was funny and smart, too. I even enjoyed helping her out. It made me feel needed. When she met a new guy at the bar or someone approached her, I would wait for her signal. If she wasn't interested and needed help getting away, she'd give me a sign. Then, I would come over, give her a friendly gesture, and act like we were a couple. He decided to leave, and I spent time talking with Andrea until he was gone from the bar. I was surprised by how much I looked forward to our conversations. She was enjoyable to talk with. We genuinely enjoyed chatting. We didn't flirt, unless talking about Pepsi and Coca-Cola counted as flirting. There was never anything wrong between us. Still, I felt a bit let down if I didn't get to see her on my nights out. For the first time, I understood how someone might feel an attraction that went beyond friendship. It made me realize how phrases like, "my wife doesn't understand me," or "my wife ignores me," could resonate with someone. I didn't think seeking attention elsewhere was right, but I understood how feelings might develop in such circumstances. I felt tempted. I never thought I would feel this way, and with each day it became harder for me to resist. So far, I had kept myself from having any inappropriate interactions with Andrea. But I wasn't perfect. With Penny seemingly indifferent, I worried about how much longer I could hold back. I thought about whether Penny felt the same way, but I quickly brushed it aside. She was too wrapped up in her work and school to miss me or even think about anyone else. Still, we were only halfway through her training program. I knew I had to take action, or our marriage would unravel before the 6 months were up. I didn't want to be the bad guy, which was something I never thought I could be. I decided to call Penny instead of waiting for her to call me. "Hi, sweetheart. I can't talk long," she said. I held back my feelings of frustration at her quick response. Getting upset wouldn't help. "I know. It seems like you're always busy, but I really need you to find some time tonight. I'll keep it short." I heard her sigh, and I felt a little more irritation. "Penny, I'll get to the point. You don't have time for me anymore. Our calls are getting less frequent, and when we do talk, you seem distant. You brush off my feelings and needs. It feels like you've forgotten there are two of us in this marriage. Yes, I'm here to love and support you, but I also need some attention and care." If I hoped she would understand, I was wrong. "Come on, Mike. Are you serious? I've spent my life prioritizing our family. Now it's my time." "You make it sound like I didn't care about our family too, Penny. I've also made sacrifices for us. I put you and the kids first in every way. Tell me, since you mentioned it, when did I ever have my time? Because I think I missed it." I must have been too focused on my work to notice. "Me too!" Penny exclaimed. "How can you say I wasn't working hard, you clueless jerk?" I stopped listening for a moment, knowing I didn't want to remember the harsh words spilling from her. When she finally quieted down, I tried again. "Penny, our marriage is in trouble. Can't you see that? If things stay this way or even get worse, we might not have a marriage at all by the time you finish that class. I've had enough of your complaining and guilt trips. Just grow up." I didn't hear what she said next because I hung up on her. I think this made her realize something because she called me back right away. "Listen, I'm sorry, Mike. You need to understand how important this is to me. I really need this. Our marriage is fine." I didn't want to argue with her anymore. She wasn't really paying attention. "I miss you so much too, and I'm sorry you're having a hard time without me. But this will be good for us in the long run. You'll see. We're halfway through. When I get back, I'll organize the house and help you eat better again." Her tone surprised me. She sounded like she thought I was foolish. It made me feel like a kid being told off. Yes, I was having a hard time without her, but not in the way she believed. She thought I couldn't take care of myself. I looked around the room. It looked just like it always did. Clean, neat, and in order. I was managing all the daily tasks just fine. My clothes were washed, the fridge was full, the floors and counters were clean, and the dishes were put away. She completely misunderstood. What I missed was the closeness, the companionship. I missed my wife, my friend, and my partner in life. After 28 years, our lives were deeply connected, and her absence felt like a piece of me was missing. I made a sound that she took as a sign of agreement. "Okay, I'm glad we talked about that. Now I really need to go." After she hung up, forgetting once again to say she loved me, I grabbed my keys and headed to the pub. Maybe a cold drink would help ease my frustration. Halfway through my first beer, I realized I had made a mistake. I was not in the mood to be around people or talk. I felt hurt and angry. I was worried, upset, and frustrated. My mind was filled with too many feelings to handle. They swirled inside me like a washing machine on a heavy cycle. Even seeing Andrea's friendly smile didn't lift my spirits. I quickly finished my beer and after a rushed goodbye went back home. Just as I entered my house, my phone beeped with a message. "Are you okay? You weren't yourself tonight. I'm worried. Call me if you need someone to talk to." I looked at the message. My eyes felt heavy with tears. I was trying not to cry. A woman I had only known for 2 months cared about me more than my wife of 28 years did. I sat on the couch, and for the first time since meeting Andrea, I didn't know what to say to her. I felt scared. Were we getting too close? Was I doing something wrong by sharing my feelings with her? We had never talked about Penny or my marriage, and I hadn't opened up about things I was ashamed of sharing with my wife. I knew I had to be careful. "I'm okay. Just a bad day. See you on Thursday if you're at the pub. Thanks, Mike." I stared at the message for a long time, checking it over and over to make sure it sounded casual before I finally hit send. I warmed up some leftovers and ate them while standing at the sink. As I ate, I realized that Penny and I hadn't talked about my visit planned for next weekend. Penny hadn't said she had plans, so I decided to book a last-minute flight for Friday afternoon. I couldn't wait another week to see my wife. I needed to see her smile, hear her laugh, and catch a whiff of her hair to remind me how much I loved her. I didn't really think Penny would do anything wrong while she was away, but I wanted to surprise her. This way she couldn't make excuses again. Finally, Friday came. I left work a bit early and headed straight to the airport. Everything went well, and by 6 in the evening I was standing at Penny's door. Jenny, a girl I recognized from her voice, answered the door. She led me to their small living room and said that Penny and their other roommate, Gail, weren't home from school yet. When I took out my phone to call Penny, she waved me off, saying she would call Penny instead and looked a bit uneasy. Before she pressed 3 buttons, I heard the sound of a key in the front door. Penny looked happy to see me. After a brief greeting, she hurried to the bathroom. I thought it was strange that she took her phone with her, but I didn't say anything since Jenny was nearby. While we waited for Penny, Jenny and I talked awkwardly. Penny didn't take long before she came back to the living room, but she quickly ran down the hall to her room and told me to keep talking to Jenny. I noticed Jenny seemed more relaxed, and our chat became easier. After spending time at the pub, the age difference between us didn't bother me anymore. As we talked, I saw Penny taking a bunch of sheets to the laundry and coming back with clean ones. I smiled, wondering if she was trying to impress me like she did when we dated. Once Penny was happy with how the room looked, she asked me if I wanted to freshen up before we went out. Even though it was really cold outside, Penny had opened her window, which I thought was odd since I knew she didn't like the cold at all. After being away for more than 3 months, I was a little surprised to see her again. She was taking a shower, and I caught a glimpse of her, which stirred up some feelings in me. I tried to show her that I was feeling excited, but she asked me to wait until after dinner for that. It was late, and she was hungry. We found a nice seafood restaurant that Penny had heard about. When she laughed at my seafood joke, "Don't believe the stories about oysters." I had 12 once, and the last 3 didn't do anything. I felt good about surprising her. We enjoyed our meal with 2 bottles of a nice Riesling, but one thing dampened our evening. Instead of just talking, Penny kept stopping to read and reply to messages on her phone. This made the night just okay instead of wonderful. I thought about whether to say something since we had taught our kids that this kind of behavior is not polite. I didn't want to ruin the evening, but I decided to bring it up. "Oh, honey, I don't usually do this, but I'm one of the older students here. Some of the younger students look up to me for help. I won't be long." Then she answered another text. In between bites of salmon and checking her phone, she asked how long I planned to stay. She mentioned she had 2 assignments to finish over the weekend. I tried not to feel bothered by her question. I had just arrived, and already she was thinking about sending me home. Even though I wanted to spend time alone with Penny, I took my time at dinner. I tried to charm her as if we were young lovers again, not an old married couple who knew each other very well. It was around 11 o'clock when we strolled back to Penny's place, holding hands. There was another car in the driveway. Penny said it belonged to Gail. I found out Gail worked as a waitress part-time to help pay for her studies and usually got off work around 10. The apartment was quiet, the only light coming from the hallway as we walked in. After dinner and some wine, I was feeling very excited. The moment for sweet talk had passed. I picked up Penny and carried her to her room, gently placing her on the bed. After 15 weeks apart, I was fighting the urge to rush things. That's how I usually would act. But the mood felt different that night. It was as if we didn't fully know each other anymore. I explored the area gently, using my lips and tongue, but I didn't find anything unusual. It wasn't until I softly told her I liked it that she started to relax and enjoy the moment. But that wasn't the only surprise I found. When I found the right spot, Penny began to move around, clearly enjoying herself. A big change from the Penny I knew. She had always been a bit reserved about such matters. I thought it was because of her upbringing and the kids in the other room. Now the new Penny seemed to be having a wonderful time and didn't care who could hear her. Just as I was finding a nice rhythm, Penny tensed up, her back arched, and she expressed her enjoyment with a sound that was unmistakably happy. A lot of things suddenly made sense. The strange look between us, the fewer phone calls, the pushback every time I wanted to visit, the quick changing of the bed sheets, even her long stays in the bathroom when she got home to find me there. I could imagine her in there talking quietly to her boyfriend about what had changed. Was that who she had been texting while we were at the restaurant? I felt a rush of confusion. I felt so much less confident. I carefully pulled away from her. I looked into her eyes and saw fear. She looked like she wanted to say something fast, but she didn't know how to address the awkward moment. I looked down at her. Her hair was messy, and her makeup was smudged. Legs I once thought were the most beautiful now seemed so tangled and out of place. Once upon a time, I would have thought her stance was attractive. Now it made me feel unsettled. Now she seemed like what she truly was, someone who had betrayed my trust. All I could think about was how angry I was. I knew I had to leave before my anger took over and I did something I would regret. She wasn't worth getting into trouble for. I quickly put on my scattered clothes and grabbed my suitcase. I needed to shut it close and zip it up. During all this, I kept my eyes away from her. I couldn't look at her. My self-control felt weak enough already without seeing her. Penny clearly didn't see how close I was to losing my temper at her for what she did when she started yelling at me. I barely listened to her words. 6 months is a long time. You've only been gone 15 weeks, and I think you started seeing someone else weeks ago. What about me? Wasn't I also alone for a long time? All the other students are getting close. But how many of them have partners waiting at home? They made me feel young and free again, not like someone who is about to become a grandmother. Thanks for reminding me that it wasn't just my old friend Jake. We can get through this. Oh no, we really can't. Penny's cries grew louder and more frantic as I tried to escape. I could hear someone getting more worried on the other side of the door. Finally, with my suitcase in hand, shoes untied, and not even glancing back, I opened the door. It almost hit me in the face since someone pushed it from the outside just as I pulled it from the inside. That left me staring at a young woman I guessed was Gail. I could see a dazed Jenny looking at me as I walked past my confused housemates toward the front door. Suddenly, I heard someone shout, "Who are you?" Before I closed the door behind me, I called back, "Penny's ex-husband," stressing the word ex. Then I left into the night. I had a flight to catch, a lawyer to meet, a marriage to end, and families to talk to. I needed to share the sad news with friends and loved ones. I also wanted to heal my own heart and maybe get to know a lovely blonde woman at a bar. Chapter 2. I jumped when Mike finally answered the phone. I thought it would go to voicemail like all my other calls over the last few days. "Hi, Penelope, what do you want? I don't have much time," he said. Even though I had planned what to say after trying to reach him, I couldn't find the words. His voice surprised me. It wasn't sad or angry, which is what I expected. It was just neutral. It felt like we were hardly more than acquaintances. In the quiet that followed, I heard him sigh with impatience. It was loud and I got anxious, worried he might hang up on me. "Please hurry up, Penelope. I don't have all day. I'm busy. Tonight is trivia night." Trivia night? How could that keep him so busy? Why was that more important than our marriage? Before I could think, the words came out of my mouth. Penelope, you don't see how much this means to me. I really need this. I felt a wave of shame thinking about past conversations we had in the last 3 months. Hearing him bring them up made me frustrated. Don't make our marriage seem small like this. We need to talk. But it seemed like my words meant nothing. Look, I have to go. My team needs my knowledge of history. I can't let them down. Talk to you later. I stared at my phone in disbelief, thinking that maybe the screen would somehow change the fact that Mike had just hung up on me. The wine I had drunk to calm my nerves before the call turned heavy in my stomach, leaving a bad taste in my mouth. I felt uneasy and wished I had chosen to fly back home right away instead of staying. I shouldn't have let Mike cool down. I should have gone after him no matter what. What had held me back? I thought about it. I felt fear, nerves, guilt, and shame. I was also really reluctant to hear Mike say hurtful things to me. But I had to admit that my training course played a part too. I had an important exam coming up on Monday, and despite everything, I didn't want to waste over 3 months of hard work. Sure, I had enjoyed myself while I was away, but I had also put in a lot of effort, and I didn't want that to go to waste. Over the weekend, I focused on studying for my exam to take my mind off trying to call Mike. The exam was yesterday, and I still hadn't booked my flight home. I knew I was putting it off. Facing Mike at home felt too real. For some reason, the house felt like Mike's place, while the apartment felt like mine. I secretly hoped Mike would come back so we could have a proper conversation. I put my head in my hands. Dealing with reality was tough. It had been 4 days, and I realized Mike wasn't coming back to talk to me. I glanced at my phone again and saw that Jake had sent me several messages. I resisted the urge to read them. That was very hard to do. The clock on my phone showed it was past 6. It was too late to ask my course coordinator for time off. I would have to wait until tomorrow. I hoped I wouldn't have to explain in detail why I needed the time off. That would be pretty awkward. Surely saying I had a family emergency would be enough. I put my phone in my pocket and walked to the kitchen. I looked in the pantry and sighed. Everything seemed like too much effort, and I just wasn't hungry. I went to my room, lay down on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind was racing. How could I make Mike see that my time away was not about him or us? It was separate, not against our relationship. How could I show him that our marriage was never in danger? I loved him. I always had and always would. A wave of frustration hit me. Men and their pride could be so trying. Yes, I had made mistakes, but only in a physical sense. In my heart and mind, I still belonged to Mike. How could I make him see that this is what truly mattered? I didn't want to feel the weight of what had happened. Yes, I had given in to my feelings, but I knew that this choice could help us in the long run. Still, I worried about how it could affect our relationship. Didn't he realize that now we could have the exciting and open relationship he had always wanted? I turned to my side and noticed Mike's deodorant on the bedside table. He had left it behind when he rushed out. I reached for it and brought it close to smell. The scent made me tear up. I shut my eyes and pressed my face into the pillow, trying to forget how hurt he looked. I had caused him pain. I never meant to, but it happened, and I felt terrible about it. Holding the deodorant close, I tried to think about the good things. I hadn't heard from our kids. I hoped that meant Mike hadn't shared anything with them. He also hadn't shouted at me or criticized me. That had to be a good sign, right? I sat up fast. What if the reason Mike was avoiding my calls and hadn't talked to the kids was that he was busy with lawyers, changing the locks and taking money from our account? What if his calm voice on the phone was just him hiding his plans to cause harm to our marriage? I jumped off the bed and rushed to the living room where I had left my laptop. I grabbed it and hurried back to my room. My heart was beating loudly as I waited for it to start. It felt like it took a long time. With shaky fingers, I logged into our bank account. I leaned back against the pillows and tears of relief ran down my face. Mike hadn't touched the money. I wiped my tears with a corner of the sheet. I was about to log out of the bank when a small voice warned me. Just because Mike hadn't taken the money yet didn't mean he wouldn't. I didn't want to upset him, but I also needed to look out for myself. So I moved a small amount of money to an old account with my name on it. It was just enough to pay for flights, taxis, and food. I planned to log off, I really did. But then I saw the little messenger icon. I had new messages. I couldn't resist clicking it. There he was. Jake. He was charming and only 25. Jake was closer in age to my daughters, yet he seemed interested in me at 48. I felt a rush of emotions, frustration and longing. Despite everything that was happening, what I wanted most was to call him. I wished to feel him nearby, easing the ache within me. I yearned to hear him express how attractive he found me and how much he valued my presence. I longed to see the appreciation in his eyes and on his face. The thrill of youthful energy stirred within me, awakening a desire for connection. I felt a mix of excitement and nostalgia for a time when life felt more vibrant. Yet I found myself caught in a tangle of thoughts, knowing that if I responded to Jake's messages, he would likely want to see me. In my mind, I could envision moments spent together, filled with warmth and shared laughter. I imagined his voice, soft and inviting, expressing how well we connected. Such thoughts consumed me, urging me to reach out. "Just call him," a part of me whispered. I let out a small sound of yearning, a slip of vulnerability. I clenched my hand against my lips, aware that yielding to those feelings could jeopardize my marriage if Mike ever found out. As I turned over onto my stomach, my laptop slipped off the bed, hitting the floor with a thud, but I barely noticed. Overwhelmed by emotion, I found myself grieving for what I stood to lose. I understood that to preserve my marriage, I would need to confront my desires, a challenging task for anyone dealing with the aftermath of tough choices. I must have drifted off to sleep as I was awakened by the gentle light of the morning sun streaming through the window. Groaning into my pillow, I felt the lingering ache of uncertainty. Would this feeling ever fade? Would I always grapple with these thoughts? Shaking off the weight of those reflections, I made my way to the bathroom to take a shower. I paused briefly at the door, relieved to find the lock still functioning. Mike hadn't changed the locks, a hopeful sign. Today was Thursday. Despite the looming changes, my keys still granted me access to what was familiar. I hoped Mike would forgive me. It might take some time, but I believed he would. A wave of affection washed over me. Mike was a good man, the best. He cared for me deeply. I knew he would find a way to accept what had happened, and we could move forward together. We would both have to make sacrifices. Mike would always know I had been with someone else, and I would have to let go of certain past joys. It was a high price, that's for sure, but it felt worth it. I opened the door, ready to see a big mess. 3 months with Mike living alone would probably mean chaos. But I was surprised. Everything was neat and clean, at least in the living room. I walked into the kitchen and dining room. They looked just as nice. He had even dusted. Did he clean up for my return? If so, that seemed like a good sign. But where was he? It was 6:30. He should be home from work and looking for dinner. I went to the stove and held my hand above the burners. They were cold. I checked the fridge. It was full, even including a plate of roast chicken and veggies wrapped in plastic. Did he warm something up for his meal? There were no dishes in the sink. Had he washed them? Had he chosen to eat somewhere else? I thought about calling or texting him, but after our only talk on Tuesday, I wasn't sure he would reply. He hadn't even come to the airport to pick me up, even though I had sent him a message with my flight details. With a sigh, I filled the kettle to make a much-needed cup of tea. While waiting for it to boil, I thought about the mixed signals Mike was sending me. He hadn't done any of the things I would expect if he wanted to end our marriage, yet he also ignored my messages and didn't show up at the airport. Was he just being distant and trying to make me feel uneasy? Once the tea was ready, I sat down at my usual spot at the table. I looked at the table and the empty chairs around it. So many family dinners had taken place on its shiny surface. I smiled, remembering lively talks and playful teasing. We may not have had much money, but we were rich in love and happiness. I cherished our memories together. Mike remembered them too, and he was always gentle with the kids. He wouldn't want them to feel like they had to choose between us. I knew that would help him forgive me, but I still wondered, where was he? I left my cup of tea on the table and went up the stairs to our room. He had been home. I could feel a little warmth in the bathroom. I noticed how clean everything was. I used to think Mike would be messy when I wasn't around, but he surprised me by keeping things tidy. I slowly walked back to the dining room and sat down with my tea. Where could he be? My stomach growled. I was hungry. I opened the fridge. Had Mike left the chicken dinner for me? I pulled back the edge of the plastic wrap and took a whiff. It smelled good. That made up my mind. I put the plate in the microwave, and while I waited for it to beep, I set the table for myself. It bothered me that I didn't know where my husband was. I thought back to our talks during the last 16 weeks. What had Mike said he was up to? I realized there wasn't much to recall. I looked around the room again. It didn't seem like he was spending his nights at home. A wave of worry started to grow in my stomach at that thought. Mike had never been one to go out with friends or take weekend fishing trips. He had always been a family man. Had that changed while I was away? Some vague memories of a name floated in my mind. It was a name Mike had mentioned in the first few weeks of the course. What was it again? John? Jeremy? Jason? I was sure the name started with a J, but none of the options I thought of felt right. And then it came to me. Jeff. I was trying to remember Jeff's last name, so I hurried to the sideboard where we kept an old address book. It was really old back when we didn't just save numbers on our phones. I flipped through the pages searching for the name Jeff. I found it under S. It was actually Jeff Saunders. There was a different color pen next to it with a phone number, so I figured it was the right guy. I dialed the number on my phone. It rang a few times, then went to voicemail. I hit the table in frustration. Why was nothing going my way? Just then, the microwave beeped, reminding me I still had my leftovers inside. I had totally forgotten about dinner. I decided to eat while thinking about what I would say when I finally got in touch with Jeff. The roast was surprisingly tasty. Once things got calmer between Mike and me, I hoped he'd cook more often. As I finished my last bite, I picked up my plate and utensils and took them to the sink. Now it was time for my second try to call Jeff, and I felt nervous. What if Mike had told him something? I remembered that Jeff could be pretty blunt, and I worried he might be straightforward with me. I sighed, knowing I would just have to deal with it. With my mind made up, I pulled up my call history and pressed redial on Jeff's number. He picked up after the third ring. Hello? His greeting sounded uncertain. Hi, Jeff. It's Penny Granger. I was wondering if you knew where Mike is? There was a long pause, and I held my breath, hoping he wouldn't hang up. His silence let in sounds from his surroundings. It seemed he was somewhere busy with other people. Hello, Penny. Long time no see. Yes. How have you been? And how is... I stopped, trying to remember Jeff's wife's name. Jane and the kids? Jean's doing well? He said, stressing her name. I winced. This was not a good time to forget her name and upset him. We're all good. And you? I really didn't think I was imagining the way Jeff asked that question. He knew something was up. I've had better days. Is Mike with you? Yes, he is. And where is he? At the couple's dart competition? I gritted my teeth, holding back a sarcastic comment. Jeff knew I wanted to know where my husband was. I'd asked twice, but it was clear he wanted to make it difficult for me to get an answer. That sounds nice. And where is this competition? At the pub. Which pub? My local one. I shut my eyes. What a clever jerk. And what is the name of your local pub? I asked, trying hard to sound pleasant. The Royal. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of asking for the address, so I just thanked him and hung up. His last words, said with a sneer, made me really mad. Anything for Mike's partner. What a sarcastic guy. I opened my internet browser and searched for the Royal. I found out there were several. There was the Royal Arms, the Royal George, and the Royal Oak. Jerk. It took me another 10 minutes to look through each pub's website until I figured out that the Royal Oak was the one having a couple's darts competition. I grabbed my handbag and paused at the doorway to check my hair and makeup. Neither looked good. I frowned at my reflection as I dug through my bag for my makeup kit and a comb. 5 minutes later, I was ready and heading out the door. I tossed my bag onto the passenger seat of my Toyota and started the engine. As I waited for the garage door to open, I typed the street address of the Royal into the GPS. Luckily, it was a short drive. Both my patience and nerves were wearing thin. I felt a wave of relief when I saw that the pub had its own parking lot, though most spaces were filled. The couple's dart competition must be a big deal. That thought made me stop for a moment. What was Mike doing at a couples event? Was he just there to support Jeff and Jean? I pushed down my worries and walked toward the entrance. I followed the sound of chatter and laughter. It took me to a room filled with tables. At the far wall, 2 dartboards were set up and games were happening. I looked around until I spotted Mike on the far left. He was focused on one of the dart games. Next to him sat a pretty blonde woman. She wasn't watching the game. She seemed to be aware of me. I felt warmth rising up my neck and spreading across my face. I saw her give Mike's arm a gentle squeeze. He turned to look at me. I didn't know what I was expecting: hurt, sadness, anger, or the look of someone who hadn't slept much. But whatever I thought, I was let down. He looked just like he always did, which kept me frozen in place. I couldn't look away from him. I noticed the blonde girl squeeze his arm again. My heart sank when I saw Mike place his hand over hers, a gesture of comfort and care. And then Mike was out of sight, blocked by a tall man. He stood too close to me. I took a step back. I didn't recognize him until he spoke. "Hello, Penny." "Ah, Jeff. Hi," I said, feeling a bit flustered. I came to find Mike. "I figured that. And, I want to say thank you. Has he been all right? I know he might have been upset after he came back from visiting me. I hope I didn't cause too much trouble for you and Jean." "He's been fine. Actually, he's doing really well." That surprised me. "Well? Really well? How could he be really well after—" I couldn't finish my thought. "After he found out you were seeing someone else for the last 4 months?" Heat rushed to my face. It felt like my cheeks were on fire. It was uncomfortable for him to bring up my mistakes, and I shot him a glare, wishing I could make him disappear on the spot. Jeff laughed at me, which only fueled my frustration. I tightened my fists. "Yes, even if it's none of your concern, I seriously doubt Mike is really well. We've been married for 28 years, and he cares for me deeply. I know he must be hurt. He's just been hiding that so you wouldn't feel uncomfortable." He's good at pretending then. I had to agree. A quick look at Mike showed he was doing a great job of acting calm. He and the blonde were now standing by one of the dartboards, with Mike getting ready to throw his first dart. It looked like the blonde was his partner. I didn't like that at all. Even though I was drawn to younger people, I could still see their charm. They were like light desserts, nice to enjoy but not really filling. They didn't have much depth, but Mike was different. He was solid and satisfying, like a well-cooked steak, meant to be enjoyed slowly. "Who's that woman?" I didn't like having to ask, but my curiosity was stronger than my desire to seem tough. Jeff turned his head to look at Mike and the blonde and smiled. "Oh, that's Andrea." Jeff was being really annoying, only answering my question without giving me any extra details. Is she with someone? Is she married? I hoped that by asking 2 questions I would get 2 answers quickly, yes and no. I felt worn out and tense, which made it hard to stay calm. Does that mean yes, she is with someone, and no, she is not married? Yes. My stomach twisted with worry, and part of me wanted to just walk away instead of asking the next question. I had a bad feeling about the answer. Who is she with? Mike. Even though I thought I was ready for it, I felt like I had been hit. "Well, that didn't take him long," I said, surprised by my own words. "Actually," Jeff said, looking at me with a serious expression, "he's had 4 months to get used to being single." He glanced at Mike and Andrea with a smile. "I guess he's really good at this, just like you are." He looked back at me and his smile faded away. His voice felt sharp and hurtful. "But then again, you did too." Epilogue. It's been 8 years since Mike and I split up, and not a day goes by that I don't think about what happened. Once it was clear we couldn't work things out, I focused on my own interests, but it didn't bring me any real joy. It didn't take long for me to realize that chasing after fleeting experiences wasn't truly fulfilling. Just like someone who cannot stop a harmful habit, the satisfaction I felt gradually diminished. I spent 8 years trying to recapture that wonderful feeling from my past. I wish I had understood back then that it would never truly return. I try not to dwell on all the relationships I've navigated since, each one becoming increasingly short-lived. I don't want to think about the choices I've made that I regret. Once I was reserved when it came to love. I worried that if I expressed too much happiness, my husband would have questioned my sincerity. Now, I've shared moments with more people than I wish to count. I've made choices that I hope my kids never learn about. My connection with them is already fragile. As I look around the kitchen and dining room, I feel a sense of longing. The spaces feel empty without Mike. He used to fill them with warmth and joy. Now they are silent. Once they felt like home. Now they feel like just a house. I should be grateful that Mike sold me his part of the house for less than it was worth, especially since I never returned to finish my studies and still work as a general nurse. But it's challenging to feel thankful when I know his kindness came from a different place. Andrea, that affluent woman, wanted Mike. She would have chosen him, even if he had no wealth. I knew they were exploring the world together. They had visited places like Scotland, Venice, Florence, and the Greek islands. I was aware because they had arranged for their children, along with their grandchildren, to join them in Hawaii soon. That meant I would be spending Christmas alone. Again. I looked at my watch and realized it was time to go to work. I grabbed my handbag and walked to the front door. Out of habit, I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. I frowned. I was 56 and feeling the effects of age. It was becoming harder to connect with younger men, who now seemed to be in their 30s and 40s, rather than their 20s. I sighed, accepting the reality. What could I do? Men my age who were looking to settle down were difficult to find. At least the good ones were. And whether they were good or not, none appeared interested in a serious commitment with me. My past had a way of lingering. The only way out seemed to be moving across the country and starting anew. But doing so would mean leaving my kids behind. And I didn't get to see them enough as it was. I couldn't imagine being even further away. While Mike and his girlfriend Andrea likely enjoyed each other's company, I was on my way to fulfill my duties as a nurse, attending to patients who needed care. I was trying to navigate my path, reflecting on choices that had led to this point. And for what? For a moment of sweetness that only brought me sadness. I held back my tears, feeling sorry for myself. Why bother crying? No one would notice. The end. And now, a little laugh to bring you back to reality, the Vandemonium joke. Thank Joe for it. This morning, around 7 a.m., I went for a walk by the marina. I saw a man running down the dock toward me. He had a long knife and was wearing traditional Islamic clothing. He was shouting, "Praise Allah!" and "Death to all non-believers." Suddenly, he tripped and fell into the water. He was struggling to keep his head above the waves because he was weighed down by the heavy explosives he was carrying. I realized that if he didn't get help quickly, he might drown. I'm not a great swimmer, but I believe in helping people in trouble. So I called the police, the Coast Guard, Homeland Security, and even the fire department. Now it's 11 a.m. None of these groups have come to help, and the man has drowned. I can't help but think I wasted my efforts. Here's the CTC joke. Good thing Van 1 knows how to make people laugh. One day, Van 1 told CTC, "You know, I know everyone you could think of. Just name anyone and I know them." Tired of his bragging, CTC decided to test him. "All right, Vandy, what about Hugh Jackman?" "No problem. Hugh and I are old friends, I can prove it." Vandy and CTC flew to the mainland and knocked on Hugh Jackman's door. When he opened it, he was wearing swim shorts, which made CTC smile. "Vandy, great to see you. Come on in for a drink. Deborah and I just started the barbecue." Even though CTC was impressed, she still had doubts. After they left Hugh's house, she turned to Vandy and said she thought knowing Jackman was just a lucky chance. "After all, he is also from Australia," she added. "Okay, fair enough. Name someone else," Vandy replied. Let me think. How about President Donald Trump?" CTC quickly replied. "Yeah," Vandy said. "He's not my favorite person, but let's go to Washington." The next day, they set off. At the White House, Donald Trump saw Vandy on the tour and waved him and CTC over. He said, "Vandy, what a surprise. I was just about to go play golf. Why don't you and your partner come along?" CTC felt nervous but still had some doubts. After they left Donald at the golf club, she shared her concerns with Vandy, who pressed her to name someone else. "Pope Francis," CTC answered. "Sure. I've known the Pope for years," Vandy said. So they flew to Rome. Vandy and CTC joined the crowd at St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. Vandy then said, "This isn't going to work. I can't spot the Pope among all these people." "Listen, I know all the guards. Let me go upstairs and I'll join the Pope on the balcony," he said. He melted into the crowd heading toward the Vatican. Sure enough, about 30 minutes later, he came out on the balcony with the Pope. But when he returned to the square looking for CTC, he found her surrounded by paramedics after what seemed like a heart attack. He rushed to her side and asked, "What happened, dear?" CTC looked up at him and said, "It was too much. You and the Pope appeared on the balcony, and the man next to me asked, 'Who is that guy in white with Vandy?'" Before moving on to the second story, please let me know your opinion. Do you like the story long or short, a series or separate parts? The comments section is always welcome, and don't forget to let me know which of these two stories you like better. Story 2. Hi, I'm Mike, and I love my kids more than anything in the world. I would do anything for them without thinking twice. I know every parent says that, and words can be empty, but I truly feel it in my heart. Not many men get the chance to prove something like this. I did, and I showed it clearly. The only sad part is that I can never tell my kids. Sounds confusing? Let me explain. If you had asked me last week, I would have said I was living a nearly perfect life. I had a good job, a nice house, a loving wife, and 3 wonderful kids. The youngest, a sweet little girl named Cindy, was sitting in the back seat of my car as we drove to our favorite park. She was only 19 months old. Every time Cindy spoke, it brought a warm feeling inside. She was just starting to learn new words. I had seen this before with my other 2 kids, too. I loved all of my children very much, but if I could choose, I hoped Cindy would be our last child. Knowing this might be the last time I experienced all these special moments as a father filled me with a mix of happiness and sadness. Daycare, Daddy. That's right, sweetie. That's a daycare center. Wow, I was surprised. We had just passed by a daycare center. But how did Cindy know that? She was smart, but she couldn't read yet. The question stayed with me for the next 2 blocks, making me feel uneasy. I usually think quickly. My friends say I have a knack for understanding lots of facts and seeing different possibilities really fast. But after 2 blocks, the only answer I could come up with was that Cindy must have visited this daycare center enough times to recognize it. The problem was, my wife, who stays at home with Cindy, had never mentioned sending her to daycare. We had even agreed to wait until she turned 2 to start. I needed to figure this out. As soon as it was safe, I turned around and parked in the lot by the center. Any parent knows how long it takes to get a toddler out of a car seat, and today was no different for me. My mind was racing, which made it even harder. When I got to the doors, I thought about what to say. I imagined saying, "Hi, my name is Mike. Do you know this little girl?" But I knew that would need more explaining. In the end, I didn't have to say much. The friendly woman at the front desk smiled at the girl in my arms. "Hello, Cindy. What are you doing here today? You usually come on Wednesdays, but I don't see your name for tomorrow." "Hi, I'm Martha. You must be Cindy's dad. Sarah has told us all about you." It's surprising that I could chat normally while my thoughts were all over the place. I think I told her that Cindy saw the place while we were passing by and wanted to say hello to her friends. After chatting for a few minutes, I made an excuse and went back to the car. There wasn't much more to think about as I drove Cindy home. Sarah and I had been married for 10 years. We were a strong couple, or so I thought. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was hiding something from me. I tried to ignore that feeling, believing there must be a good reason for her secret. I just didn't know what it was. It was annoying that I couldn't just ask her. Sarah was on her yearly cruise with her favorite aunt and wouldn't be back until Saturday at the earliest. To go back a bit, I married Sarah 12 years ago after dating for 2 years. We were like 2 peas in a pod. We felt like soulmates in every way. Neither of us was very ambitious, but we knew what we wanted from life: to see the world and to have 2 kids. After 4 years of traveling and being very much in love, she stopped taking her birth control, and within a few months, we found out we were going to have a baby. When we first met, Sarah was a secretary at a company that made electrical parts. Shortly after our wedding, the economy got worse, and she was asked to take unpaid Wednesdays off. That worked for both of us. Our lives felt complete when James was born. Sarah was thrilled to be a stay-at-home mom, and I was happy to be the only one working. I was a designer for a group of people who didn't really appreciate good ideas. I kept telling myself that one day I would have enough money to start my own business, and then I would be the one in charge. Sarah took to being a mom like a fish to water. We quickly became the happiest family around, even if work was a different story. When James was about 3 months old, we had a small health scare. Sarah was having trouble making enough milk for the baby. Following the doctor's advice, we found a solution together. We decided to use some formula and made sure Sarah got a day of rest. I arranged for her mother, who was a widow, to take care of Jamie every Wednesday morning. This gave Sarah some time to relax. During this time, she either stayed home or took adult education classes. It was in those classes that she rediscovered her love for sewing. After that, Sarah got even busier planning and organizing the building of our new house. She enjoyed it a lot and felt it gave her a chance to express her creative side. Sarah waited to stop nursing Jamie until he was almost 2 years old. There were a few bumps along the way that slowed down the building process, but we moved in just before our second child, Jenny, arrived. Yes, Jenny was born when Jamie was just a little over 2.5. Life just kept getting better. The only time I didn't spend every free moment with the kids was when I showed Sarah how much I still cared for her. Jenny was a pretty easy baby. We expected some issues with breastfeeding and knew just how to handle them when they arose. Sarah stopped feeding our little girl when she was about 18 months old. When I suggested that I undergo a procedure so we wouldn't have more children, we had already planned for 2. Sarah surprised me by suggesting we have a third. I hesitated, I must admit. We had a plan, and having another child would change that. In the end, Sarah persuaded me with simple reasoning. If 2 wonderful children were great, how happy would we be with 3? Cindy joined our family 2 years and 6 months after Jenny. I don't want to give the impression that everything was perfect, though. I had to remember to put my clothes in the laundry basket instead of leaving them around it. Sarah had to avoid clogging the sink with her hair. Sarah has long hair, which is lovely, but I was surprised by how much hair came out every time she brushed it. We often had little disagreements about razors. She would use mine and end up dulling the blade. These were just a few of the small habits we tried to manage so we could keep peace at home. I once heard someone say that it's the little things, like not putting the lid back on the toothpaste, that can affect love in a marriage. Most couples, like us, have already addressed the bigger issues like beliefs and politics before getting married. We both believed in that saying, so we tried our best to avoid little annoyances. But sometimes, Sarah and I had bigger discussions too. The first serious one happened when our son James was about 16 months old. It started over the smallest thing. I came home one day to find that Sarah had used some hair mousse to dye Jamie's hair bright red. She gave me a lighthearted reason for wanting to dress Jamie up as a leprechaun for St. Patrick's Day, saying it was to celebrate her Irish background. I didn't mind the idea, but I felt strongly against changing our son's hair color with chemicals. After a significant discussion, where I raised my voice for the first time, we agreed that we needed to communicate and agree on these things before moving forward in the future. About a year ago, after her mother passed away unexpectedly, Sarah wanted to put Cindy in daycare on Wednesdays. She thought this would give her a day off without kids. I really didn't like this idea. I couldn't stand the thought of Cindy being cared for by people we didn't know, and I worried about how she'd feel being apart from us. Plus, since our older 2 kids were in school or preschool, Sarah only had 1 child to look after for 6 hours a day. So, like all good couples, we found a middle ground. I said I would think about daycare when Cindy turned 2 and was ready for it emotionally. I offered to take care of the kids one day each weekend so Sarah could have some time for herself. I was glad she rarely accepted my offer because, after a long week at work and all the responsibilities of owning a home, I really wanted to enjoy time with my kids instead of managing them. Plus, her not asking for help showed me she could handle everything just fine. Another thing bothering me was Sarah's hints that she wanted a 4th child ever since Cindy's first birthday. It was odd because we had talked about it when we first got married and agreed on having 2 kids. Then we ended up with 3. For a few months, Sarah brought it up all the time. It felt like she was trying to persuade me about something significant. It was funny because when I asked her why she had changed her mind, she couldn't give me a good answer. We kept discussing it, but I was firm in my decision this time. Luckily, she had backed off a bit in the last few weeks. I hoped that meant I had escaped a challenging situation. I was one of 6 kids, and my dad passed away just after I, the youngest, moved out. He worked hard all his life and never had a chance to relax at the end. I didn't want the same thing to happen to me. As we drove through the small shopping area near our home, something caught my eye. It was the new electronic sign above the gas station, clearly showing that today was Tuesday, May 1st, along with the time and temperature. Today is Tuesday, tomorrow will be Wednesdays. For the first 5 years of our marriage, Sarah worked every weekday except Wednesdays. After James was a few months old, Sarah had her mother take care of him, on Wednesdays. That all went on until her mother passed away last year. Now, I found out that she had been taking little Cindy to daycare once a week on Wednesday. The result? My wife had about 6 hours to herself every Wednesday, and this had been happening for around 10 years. I felt sure there was a simple, innocent reason why I was kept in the dark by a woman I thought was completely honest. Deep down, something told me it was about more than just needing a break from being a mom. I didn't like this nagging feeling of doubt growing in my mind. I really wanted to call her and ask what was behind all this. I hoped it would ease my worries, but I couldn't. Sarah was unreachable until Saturday. Let me explain. Even before we got married, Sarah would leave once a year to visit her aunt in England, though she didn't go to England each time. Every year for the last 8 years, Sarah went on a cruise with her wealthy aunt. They traveled to places like the Mediterranean, the West Indies, and Alaska. I once asked her how much it cost, and she told me her aunt paid for everything. At first, I thought she went on these trips to stay in her aunt's favor and maybe receive some assistance later. I didn't think much of it back then, but now I wasn't so sure. When the kids were born, Sarah adjusted her trips a bit to fit our family. She would freeze her breast milk and leave me cans of formula. The recent time she stopped breastfeeding Cindy was partly so she could enjoy her current trip. I had never met Sarah's aunt, just talked to her a few times on the phone. Did I mind that Sarah was away from the family for a week each year? Not at all. She deserved the break. I took the week off too, and the kids and I had a fantastic time together. Since I believe in working to live rather than living to work, I spent my week taking care of the house. I did school runs and made dinner. I found it enjoyable, so taking a break from one of my 4 vacation weeks didn't bother me. Plus, after she got over her jet lag, it would be worth it for me. Sarah told me they were on a cruise near Antarctica where phones couldn't reach them. Isn't it funny how one small lie makes you doubt everything someone has said to you? How did I know she was on a cruise near Antarctica? Because she would share pictures and stories with us when she got back. That seemed clear enough, right? There was an easy way to find out. I remembered that Sarah had called her aunt last week on the home phone. I checked the call list and found an English number. Without thinking, I pressed redial. It rang for about 6 times before I realized the time difference. It was around 1 a.m. there. I was about to hang up to stop my overly shy behavior when the answering machine kicked in. "Hi, you've reached The Simpsons. Pete and I are enjoying a cruise near Antarctica right now. You can reach us on my mobile after May 3rd. That was nice to hear, right? She really was on a cruise. But now I was curious. Who was this Pete? And why didn't she mention Sarah? Plus, I remembered the aunt was returning on the 3rd, and my wife wouldn't be back until the 6th. I felt a tight knot in my stomach. Sarah and the kids mean everything to me, but this mystery was bothering me. I just had to find out more. The photo albums. On the shelf were small books filled with pictures from their cruises. I picked out last year's album and opened it. There was a picture of the beach in Cancun, and another of her aunt standing in front of a big ship in Barbados. Her aunt was at the officers' table, surrounded by bright white uniforms and shiny gold details. I looked through every page, but I couldn't find what I needed. I was worried about whether Sarah was telling the truth, so I picked up another photo album, then a third, and even a fourth. Not a single picture showed my wife. If I were the kind of person who noticed these things, I would have found it very strange. Why had I never thought about this before? It was because I had never been suspicious before. I wanted to prove my doubts wrong. I thought hard to find another way to show Sarah was innocent. Then it hit me. Her car. For as long as I could remember, Sarah always took late-night flights to meet her aunt. She took a taxi to the airport, but this time she drove her car and parked it in the long-term parking lot. I opened the filing cabinets and pulled out the files for Sarah's savings and credit cards. Thankfully, each photo album had dates, so I could find the right weeks quickly. I remembered from before that the long-term parking cost $85 for a week. After looking through the statements for 10 minutes, I didn't find any charges close to that amount. I was going through the trips in reverse order when I noticed something strange. For the 8 or 9 days Sarah was away, there were no charges at all. I knew her aunt paid for everything, but not even a single cup of coffee while traveling. My concern grew. I needed to find out more. At that point, Cindy woke up. I called my sister to ask if she could watch her for a couple of hours. As always, she happily agreed. I dropped off the cheerful girl, promising myself she would never know she was part of the only time I doubted my wife. I hoped that after today, I could forget it and think of it as a little awkward moment in a long and happy marriage. I drove to the airport. Thankfully, we live in a small city. I parked in the short-term lot, squeezed between the 2 long-term lots. It used to be sheep fields, but now there were cars parked in neat rows for miles. I chose a random direction and started walking. To keep it short, after 45 minutes, I realized Sarah's car wasn't there. So where could it be? On my way back, many thoughts filled my mind. Should I be worried enough to call a lawyer just to check my fears? I had a feeling I would face a tough situation if we ever divorced. I had come to understand this for some time now. I might be the only person in my country, Literotica land, who didn't have a lawyer for a friend. What a disappointment. I needed the facts, fast. I could feel my doubts growing in my mind, and I wanted to stop them before they became too big. When I got home, I had an hour left before I needed to pick up the kids from their schools. So I decided to look through the house from top to bottom. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I hoped something would show itself as wrong. Sarah loved our home. She had worked closely with the architect to design it and had helped the builders along the way. The house was 3 stories tall. It stood on a sloping hill, and when you entered, you found the kitchen, guest room, dining area, main living room, and 1 bathroom on the main level. Upstairs, there was a family room, 4 bedrooms, and 2 more bathrooms. Because of the way it was built, there was plenty of space underneath for a storage room and Sarah's sewing area. The sewing room was reached by a steep, narrow set of stairs. Since it was the only room in the house that belonged solely to Sarah, it was the best place to begin looking. By the time I had to leave for school, I was sure of one thing. There was nothing strange in her sewing room. Everything there was normal for someone who sews. I even looked at the sewing table for hidden spaces, feeling a bit silly for doing so. After leaving Sarah's sewing room, I peeked into the storage room down a short hallway, but I decided I would have to check it later. I noticed how dark it was, even in the middle of the afternoon, since it was partly a basement. I was distracted as I picked up my 3 items and made dinner for them. I didn't feel like myself at all. Once everyone was in bed, I set up an old baby monitor in Cindy's room and took the other part to the lower level again. In the storage room, I moved and opened every single box. Everything seemed normal and nothing looked out of place. I went back upstairs to check on the kids before I sat down in my favorite chair. I stayed up late that night, lost in my thoughts. The next morning, I was still in a bad mood when I took the 2 older kids to their schools and dropped Cindy off at daycare. She seemed to enjoy it, so we went along. A different woman at the front desk looked a bit surprised to see us, but checked and said it was fine. Detective Mike asked some questions, and I learned that Cindy usually got picked up at 2:30 and had been going there for about 7 months. My frustration about Sarah's issues was growing. I imagined what excuse she would come up with if Cindy ever mentioned daycare when I asked her if she was happy. I sat in the car with my head resting on the steering wheel. What could I do to find out the truth about Sarah's situation? I couldn't wait any longer for Sarah to come back. Not having answers was making me really anxious. I had searched the house and found nothing, but maybe I missed something. There had to be something that would help me understand. I decided to go back to the house quickly. I started in the guest bedroom, then moved to the master bedroom. I looked everywhere, even checking the bottoms of cupboards and drawers for hidden panels. Still, I found nothing. Next, I turned on the home computer and searched through all the files. Again, there was nothing useful. Sarah couldn't access my work laptop, so I didn't need to check that. The only places left were her car or her phone. Even with all my searching, I still had no answers. Why hadn't she told me about the daycare, and where was her car? Where was my wife, and what was she doing on Wednesdays? I was so frustrated it was hard to explain. It was only 1:15, so I had time to try the only thing I could think of. I went down to the sub-basement and started over. I felt like I must be missing something. This time, I moved the sewing desk and checked every corner to see if there was a hidden space, but I found nothing. Then I decided to take everything off the shelves and look in, under, and behind every item. Halfway through, I picked up one of those wheat bags people use for sticking pins and needles in. One of the needles pricked my finger. I was tired from not sleeping, worried, and very frustrated. I did something I usually never do. I lost my cool. Grabbing the little bag, I threw it toward the far wall. Well, that was the plan. At the last second, it slipped from my grip and went straight for the bare light bulb. There was a loud noise, and suddenly everything went dark. Frustrated with my lack of control, I sank into Sarah's chair, with only a faint light from the doorway to see by. The small windows on this floor, combined with the cloudy weather, made it feel even darker. Just like my mood. I stayed in Sarah's chair to calm down, figure out where to search next, and think like she would to find clues. If this kept up, I might really worry myself before she got home on Sunday. I turned the chair slowly, thinking about different ideas and possibilities. I didn't notice a small beam of light at first. It was only when I looked down at my hand resting on the sewing table that I saw it. The light was shining on my wedding ring. Only later did I realize the funny part of it all. I followed the beam of light to the wall of the room, which was made from old rough wood panels. I remembered Sarah saying she got it for a good price when we built the house. She explained that distressed meant the wood had some flaws, like little holes. The light was shining through one of those holes. It was about the size of a milk bottle cap, just above and to the right of the sewing desk. I put my eye to it, but I could only tell that there was a space behind it. I couldn't see anything else. As a test, I switched off the light near the main door. Just as I thought, the light from the hole disappeared too. I ran upstairs, grabbed an extra light bulb, and quickly put it in. The room was bright again. For the next 10 minutes, I pushed, poked, and pulled at the wall, looking for a hidden door. But once again, all I got was a deep feeling of frustration. I was just about to grab some tools to examine the wall more closely when I suddenly remembered a scene from one of Sarah's and my favorite movies. In that movie, a girl was exploring a grand old house, trying to find the way into a hidden passage. She finally unlocked the door by placing her finger in a small hole. I looked over at the knot hole in front of me. My feet moved on their own toward it. I poked my pinky into the hole and felt something blocking it at 3 o'clock. It wouldn't budge when I tried to push it in or pull it out. But when I turned it to the right, I heard a faint click, and a wooden panel on the far side of the room opened just a little. My heart started racing. One moment it was calm, then suddenly it was beating fast. We had built this house together. The only people who could possibly know about this secret were the architect, the builders, and one other person, Sarah. Sarah was the only one wanting to make a hidden room. What was I about to find out about my honest wife? I knew deep down that whatever was in that room was important. The way she kept me away from where it was being built told me that. Instead of feeling pleased that I wasn't imagining things, that Sarah really did have a secret, my heart sank. I pushed my sadness and disappointment away for later. When I opened the door, I saw a beam of wood against the wall. That's why I hadn't felt anything when I tried to check earlier. The inside of the room was lit by a strip light above the door. They say that people who keep secrets can get caught by little things. Tonight, that saying was true. Having that light connected to the one in the sewing room was a mistake. Unless the outer light went out, or, in this case, was accidentally damaged, the hidden room would never be found. I found it strange to think if this was a mistake by Sarah or if the electrician didn't follow her plans. I knew I was hesitating. Deep inside, I understood that whatever was in this hidden space would change my happy life forever, and I felt unsure about uncovering Sarah's secrets. For a long moment, I thought about closing the door and walking away. Maybe not knowing was better. Later on, I realized that I could never have guessed how much my life would change. The space was 2 feet deep. Behind the 3-foot-wide door, I saw clothes hanging on a steel rail, just like in Sarah's closet upstairs. However, these clothes were clearly nicer and much different from what I was used to seeing her wear. At the bottom was a small set of drawers. A quick look showed they were filled with delicate clothes that, when worn by my lovely wife, would have caught anyone's attention. Next to the drawers were racks holding about 10 pairs of high-heeled shoes. The right wall of the room was wood and clearly the end. The left wall was made of steel. Turning left, I noticed a gap between the wall and more steel. In the dim light, I could see that what I thought was a solid wall was actually the left door of a set of double doors. I found a latch, opened it, and pushed the second door wide. The other half of the hidden room was taken up by a huge fireproof safe. It was so large that it must have been put in before the room was finished. Where had I been when all this was happening? Sarah, oh Sarah, what are you keeping from me? On the front of the safe was a keyhole and a big round handle. Wow! Now I had to search for the key. Feeling frustrated, I grabbed the handle and leaned on it, almost losing my balance when it turned unexpectedly. Sarah seemed so sure I wouldn't find the secret spot that she never locked the safe. I didn't know how to feel about that. Did she think I was foolish, or did she think she was very clever? If the safe wasn't for security, then what was it for? To keep out mice, or to protect the things inside from fire if the house caught flames? That made whatever was inside seem very valuable. Taking a deep breath, I opened the heavy door and stepped into a whole new world. The top two parts of the space were filled with steel shelves. The bottom part was a steel drawer. Oddly enough, the first thing I noticed was a shiny brochure from a cruise line. The front cover showed a cruise ship sailing near a stunning ice shelf, Antarctica. Under the brochure, there were other flyers for Alaska, the West Indies, and as you might guess, all the other places she claimed to have visited with her aunt. Even at this early point in my search, I thought this might be her research material. This could be where she got ideas for her exciting made-up stories about her cruises. One shelf had journals organized by year along with papers, some loose and some in envelopes. The next shelf had more papers and a few DVDs. All of them were not for sale and were in their own plastic cases. Each disc had a set of initials and a date. The one on top was marked AK, the 4th of August, 2016. That was about 20 months ago. The bottom shelf had an open wooden box. When I pulled it out, the light hit it and it sparkled. Inside, mixed together, was jewelry. A lot of jewelry. Jewelry has never really caught my interest, but I know 18-karat gold when I see it. The items were clearly very costly, but strangely they seemed carelessly thrown in, almost like they were unwanted. The person who owned them didn't seem to value the expensive jewelry at all. Among the shiny pieces were two soft ring boxes. These seemed to have been placed there with more thought. When I opened the first bigger box, I was amazed. Inside was a single large diamond. I lifted it to see it better, and the way it sparkled in the light made me think it was real. The second box made me feel a sense of nostalgia. It looked small and unimportant beside all the other items. Inside were two rings. One had a big diamond surrounded by two smaller diamonds, while the other was just a simple gold band. The smaller diamonds looked tiny next to the big one in the other box. I recognized those rings right away. I had bought them myself. One had been given away when I was on my knees. The other time, I was standing in front of a priest. I dropped to my knees, making a sad imitation of my proposal, my hands shaking a lot. My wife was somewhere nearby, probably within a short drive, but she was alone. My mind started to race with thoughts I didn't want. I admit I stood up but then stumbled back and sat down in a chair, feeling overwhelmed for a while. I was lost in my feelings until my phone alarm rang, reminding me it was time to pick up the kids from school. I took a deep breath, trying to push aside the shock and sadness, and left. This time, I got James and Jenny first, then headed to my sister Carrie's house. We had been invited for dinner. I thought about what I had discovered and what it meant the whole way there. After dinner, while my kids played with their cousins, I finally told my sister and brother-in-law everything. They couldn't believe Sarah was anything but a caring wife and loving mother. They wanted to rush over to my house right away to see what was in the envelopes, papers, and journals. We all knew the truth would come from those documents before Sarah returned. My sister really wanted to go home with me at that moment, but I told her I needed to handle everything first. After saying goodbye, I took the kids home and got them ready for bed. Once they were settled, I grabbed the baby monitor after Cindy left and went back under the house. I felt nervous, but I also didn't really want to start reading. Before I picked up the first journal, my choice to start with those, I pushed the wooden tray back onto its shelf. That made me notice the one place I hadn't looked at yet, the steel drawer at the bottom. It was at a tricky angle, and I couldn't move it. I knelt on the floor to see it better. There was no lock on it. I grabbed it tightly and pulled harder at a better angle. It came out. I sat back on my heels, surprised. The reason it was so hard to open was that it was heavy inside. But then again, gold is heavy. On a thick piece of felt, there were 11 gold bars. Some were smaller 100-gram bars, but most were the larger 250-gram ones. I knew a bit about gold bars. Right after we got married, Sarah had me buy a 100-gram bar as an investment. It was still in a safety deposit box at the bank. Her boss thought gold prices would rise. He was correct. The bar we bought for about $7,500 was now worth over $14,500. It felt like every week Sarah would check the current gold price and tell me how much our shiny piece was worth. I quickly calculated in my head and figured the drawer had around $133,000 worth of gold. As I tried to understand this, I noticed that the felt under the bars was uneven. As I lifted a corner of the mat, I discovered another set of bars underneath. Quickly removing a few of them from the front, I pulled back another piece of felt and found another layer of gold. Was this how Howard Carter felt when he opened King Tut's tomb? As I moved the gold pieces, I saw that the third layer was the last one. I worked fast but carefully to clear out the drawer and arranged all the gold pieces by size. Then, I picked up my phone and opened the calculator app. I won't go into the details of the math, but even at a price of about $1,800 per ounce, the gold in the drawer was worth over $1.5 million. It was only at that moment that I wondered where Sarah had gotten it all. My gaze drifted to the right, where some clothes hung that I wasn't supposed to see. A troubling thought filled my mind. As I placed the gold pieces back into the drawer, I frantically tried to come up with a reasonable explanation for everything I had discovered. Besides the clear issue at hand, I wasn't sure which documents to look at first. In the end, I thought the journals would help me understand what was happening, so I grabbed the one labeled 2018 and opened it. I was mistaken. It wasn't a journal at all. It was a ledger, and it wasn't just a simple list. It was written in a shorthand style. The first page had a balance carried over from the end of the previous year. Oddly, the amounts weren't just in dollars. They were in both ounces and dollars. In the far right column, I saw a dollar amount, $1,657,900. I figured this was how they kept track of the changing gold prices. The first page showed that while the gold amount stayed the same, the cash grew by $1,500 on the last Wednesday of January. I turned to February. There were cash entries of $1,500 each on 3 Wednesdays. January was the school break, and we took a trip for 3 weeks. We only had a few days left to get ready for the kids to go back to school in early February. Oh no. In March, I saw 3 payments of $1,500. In April, there were 3 deposits of what I thought would be the regular amount, but also 1 large deposit of $20,000. The next day, I noticed a withdrawal for the same amount. I quickly checked the rest of the record, but it was empty. At the back, I found 3 printed sheets of paper. They seemed to list homes or something for sale. There were more important things to look at, so I only gave them a quick look. Then I picked up last year's journal. This time, I just skimmed it until I found something in the withdrawal section. There were 2 items in 1 month. The first was for $78.53 and was labeled PETRL. I guessed it stood for petrol. Fuel for her car? That seemed strange if it was. The second charge was labeled VS $125 Ling. I had no idea what that meant. This notebook also had delivery slips stuck in it. It took me a couple of minutes to check, but they were receipts for the gold bars. On the same page as the receipt, the cash amount went down, but the ounces went up. Most months had 3 cash entries, sometimes 4. In the summer, there were only 1 or 2. Out of curiosity, I flipped back to last March. There were 2 amounts of $1,500 and 1 significant amount of $20,000. Next to that was written West Indies. You guessed it. That was the cruise destination from last year. Quickly scanning the 2016 notebook, I saw the $20,000 entry next to the word Greece, which was the planned destination for that year. I looked at the stack of brochures. Sarah came back that year with lively stories, and even a few Greek words. If she hadn't really gone, then her dishonesty was both shocking and sad. Who was this woman? Did I really know her at all? I took a deep breath and pushed my thoughts aside. I wanted to think clearly. Instead of looking through all my old journals, I decided to open the first one from 2003, the year before I met her. A quick look showed that there were many entries each month, but they weren't very long. The first entry recorded $200, but by the third page, the amounts had climbed to $600. Next to each amount, there was an initial. I noticed about 4 or 5 different initials. As I flipped through the rest of the journal, I spotted 3 big amounts. Each one was for $10,000. This was all really confusing, so I turned my attention to the envelopes instead. The first envelope was just a typical business-sized one. While it looked normal on the outside, what was inside made everything weirder. It contained the papers for a Ferrari. The owner was Sarah, and it had been registered less than 2 years ago. Sarah owned a car that was probably worth at least $500,000. Where could it be? A random memory popped into my head. It was from about a year ago, I think. I was running an errand for work when I stopped at a traffic light, right next to a shiny red Ferrari convertible. I looked over to admire it. The driver was a blonde woman wearing sunglasses and a scarf. She looked around my age, but I didn't pay too much attention to her. The car was what caught my eye. Next to her was an older man whose hand rested on her leg. He seemed somewhat familiar. I was focused on the car's sleek design when I noticed the driver glancing at me. I smiled at her, but she quickly looked away, perhaps feeling a bit shy. Just then, I saw the light turn green out of the corner of my eye. I thought the Ferrari would zoom past me, but it stayed close behind until it turned off 2 blocks later. Could that have been Sarah driving it? There definitely wasn't a fancy car worth that much money in our driveway. I pay attention, so I would have noticed. So where did she keep it? She must have a hard time, having one of the best cars in the world and not being able to use it whenever she wanted to. Maybe just once a week on Wednesdays. But how could she avoid being seen by people she knew? Perhaps by wearing a wig, a scarf, and big sunglasses. The next envelope was large and stuffed. It had money inside, a lot of money. But that didn't interest me at all. Oddly, there was a brochure for apartments under the envelope. I recognized the place. The first phase of the complex had opened with a lot of excitement a couple of months ago. Sarah and I had spoken about it. The units by the river were not selling well because of the high price. They cost almost $750,000. One thing I used to enjoy, well, to be honest, I'm not sure anymore. I decided to give her a chance at this point. Unlike lawyers, who often think everyone is innocent until proven broke, I believe in the saying, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. Where was I going with this? I liked that Sarah was content with our life. She didn't care about climbing the career ladder. She seemed happy with my good but not huge salary. We could have bought one of those apartments eventually if she worked too, but that would mean she would have to give up being a full-time mom. Both of us didn't want that. So I understood why Sarah had the brochure, but why was it hidden away here? As I stepped back into the closet, moving away from the good light in the sewing room, I saw a folded piece of paper on the floor. It was a blank title deed for an address in the apartment complex. Sarah's last name was written neatly in the right spot. At the bottom, where a stamp should be, there was a messy drawing of a stamp. The person who drew it clearly had no artistic skills. Next to it, in the same shaky handwriting as her name, was the note. You know what you have to do to get the real thing. Sarah might have understood. I, on the other hand, was confused. The next, thinner envelope had a simple 1-page note about the value of what I guessed was a big diamond ring. It was assessed by a business in the next town over. I opened the big ring box and peeked inside again. Wow, so that's what a 5-carat diamond worth $132,000 looks like. I had suspected it was valuable the first time I saw it, but I was amazed it could be worth so much. I placed the ring and the papers back inside. As an afterthought, I looked at the valuation again. July 2014. Jenny was just a few months old back then. Did that time mean anything special? I couldn't think of any reason. When I moved a stack of desk calendars on the back shelf, I found 2 boxes of morning after pills. The calendars showed Sarah's cycle. I was too rushed to consider what that meant. The other papers were in envelopes labeled by year, and when I opened one, it was filled with receipts. I caught a glimpse of one. It was from a lingerie store. It listed a maternity set. We had a similar collection of receipts upstairs. Sarah kept every one of them, just in case she had to return something. That left only the DVDs. Deep down, I knew these would challenge my perception of Sarah. There were 6 DVDs in total. 3 had different initials and were dated shortly after we got engaged. The other 3 were all labeled AK. One was from 3 months before our wedding, and the second was from 7 years later. About 2 years ago, I found myself at a crossroads. I glanced at the DVDs in front of me and then checked my watch. It was time to decide. I already felt tired from being up all night, and I knew the videos would keep me awake even longer. I had 3 kids to take care of, and I didn't want to lose more sleep over this. So I texted my sister to see if she could watch Cindy again the next day. If Sarah's only wrongdoing was stealing my family time, that was a pretty big offense already. I won't go into the details of how I got my older kids to school and dropped off Cindy. Let's just say that by 9:05 a.m. on Thursday, I was in the living room, ready to watch the first DVD. As I walked back to the family room with the DVD case in hand, I felt my heart racing. I looked again at the label. SJ, the 20th of September, 2005. That was the month I proposed to Sarah. Did that mean something? I wasn't sure. My thoughts stopped when I heard Sarah's voice from the television. I turned around and sank into the couch, feeling my heart drop. It wasn't the pictures on the screen that worried me, it was the conversation she was having with SJ. So, you want me to pretend to be your wife while a man you found tries to charm me? Yes, that's pretty much it. But you already know that. I know, but just play along, Steve. Talking about it helps me get ready for the part. It makes me feel excited. I sighed. It was bad enough that she was going to be with another man, but the fact that he enjoyed watching his wife be with someone else made it even worse. Steve took a deep breath. All right. I've brought one of Josie's dresses and some of her things to wear. As you know, your hair is almost the same color, but you should put it up in a clip. Josie always keeps her hair up during the day. They talked about the nicknames and sweet names Steve and Josie used for each other. Steve handed Sarah a bag, which she emptied onto the bed. Then, without feeling shy or awkward at all, she changed her clothes. This made me realize, even if I didn't want to, that she had been in a similar situation with him before. That thought stirred feelings of anger and betrayal inside me. She put on a lovely white dress. Strappy sandals completed her look. Sarah moved to the mirror, gathering her hair and twisting it into a messy bun held up with a clip. "Is this okay?" she asked. "Yes, perfect. You could almost be her twin. Is that why you like me, Steve? Because I look like your sweet, innocent wife?" Steve nodded. "But maybe the wild version, the one who will do things for you that she won't, right?" "Yes," he whispered. "Do you like the idea of seeing her with another man?" Again, Steve nodded. I frowned. What a confused guy. Want to see her enjoy herself with someone else? Sarah had lowered her voice to a whisper. Want to see Josie with someone else? Yes, I do. I hope you found her a good match then, one who will really make her happy. I did. It's great. Steve cleared his throat and shifted a bit. Sarah took a step closer, and I could see her playful side. So, is he going to really catch her attention, dear? When she said dear, I knew she was in character. It was not something we usually said. Is he going to make me proud and excited? I'm not even sure how many times this has happened before. He really enjoys this situation. It excites him more than anything else. Can you hear me? He wants you to be open to others. He wants to share you with new experiences, even with acquaintances and colleagues. He has a wish to witness you engaging with different people, but he's too scared to ask you directly. That's why he's been coming to me for almost 2 years. He has me shower first using the same soap and shampoo as you. He makes me wear your clothes, your perfume, even your old belongings. Then I pretend to be you and meet some individuals he finds. Just look and see what he really wants for you. Sarah's words shocked me completely. I was ready to see her with another man, but this was something else entirely. Now I understood what the video was really about. It wasn't a keepsake. It was a plan for making money. I quickly paused the video and ran to her sewing room to get the journal from 2005. Each month up to September, there was a deposit marked SJ. After that, there was nothing for the rest of the year. There weren't any big unexplained deposits either. I looked at 2006 too, but it was like SJ had vanished. If she was trying to pressure Steve, where was the proof? She kept track of every other deposit and withdrawal, so why wouldn't she do the same for the potential leverage? Still contemplating the mystery, I went back upstairs and prepared myself for the gathering. The person Steve found for Josie was tall, maybe 6'2" or 3", and really strong. I watched, feeling a bit uneasy, as the three of them pretended Steve was bringing home an old friend from college for dinner. It felt like watching a poorly made film from the 80s. "I'm going to change and freshen up," I said. "Why don't you both get to know each other while I'm away?" "Don't worry, I'll keep Jimmy engaged for you," Josie said to Steve with a smile. Steve left the room. "Let me get you a fresh drink." Josie stood up and moved to Jimmy's side of the table. As she refilled his glass, she accidentally brushed against his arm. She then set the bottle down and gave his shoulders a light squeeze. "You're really strong, Jimmy. Do you lift weights or something?" They joked back and forth, and just then Steve came back. "Stand up, Jimmy." Jimmy stood up, and it was clear he was quite animated. "Well, would you look at that, Josie?" said Steve, pointing toward Jimmy. "You seem to have made quite an impression." "It wasn't me, I promise. I didn't do anything," Josie replied, a bit flustered. "Just thinking about you got him in high spirits. Looking at you had that effect. I'm so happy you're doing this for me." Jimmy stepped closer to the bed, his expression intense. Josie squeezed her legs tight, glancing at Steve with worry. "You can do this, Josie. Just for me." Steve gently took his hand away and placed it on her knees. Josie kept shaking her head, but eventually she seemed to relent. Jimmy leaned in closer, looking deep into her eyes. I winced, feeling hurt by the sincerity in her words. "And everything else, darling." Oh no, I want you to be with me whenever you need comfort, as long as Steve agrees." "Good girl," Steve sighed. I flinched again. Her honesty was cutting into my heart. As soon as Josie said this, she shivered, lifting away from the bed. I covered my mouth, feeling sick. How many times had she felt that way with me? Too many to remember. Jimmy was with her, lost in his own world. He didn't notice her shivers. He was focused on what he wanted. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, shocked. For most of the video, I couldn't see the woman as Sarah because she played her part as Steve's wife, Josie, so well. It was her body language that gave her away, her movements, the way she leaned back when she was relaxed. This was Sarah, my Sarah, who wasn't really mine after all. I got up thinking about the film when suddenly it switched to Sarah speaking directly to the camera, now fully dressed. "Hi, Steve. I wanted to give you a little reminder of our last time together. I'm sure you remember it was something special. Yes, you heard me right. Our last time. My situation has changed, and while it was nice, it's time for me to move on. This video will not be shared as long as you are good and do not contact me again. If you see me in public, do not acknowledge me. If we are introduced, act like it's the first time we are meeting. You need to promise me that you won't tell anyone about me or our time together. If I hear that you've said anything to anyone, your dear Josie will get a copy of the video. And I'm sure you wouldn't want that, would you, Stevie?" After she spoke, there was a moment before the screen went dark, and Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile, not the warm and caring one I was used to seeing. I felt awful, as if I had hit rock bottom. I wasn't sure if I could eat again, but now I understood why the video was made. It wasn't just a threat, it was protection for her. I looked at the other video cases on the shelf, unsure if I could handle watching 5 more like the one I just saw. I knew if I didn't face this today, I might never find the courage to do it again. "Just do it, Mike," I said out loud, hoping saying it would help me feel stronger. "Get it over with quickly. It will hurt less in the end." With a heavy sigh at my own advice, I moved slowly to the DVD player. I took out the SJ video and replaced it with RG from October 18th, 2005. As I pressed play, I realized I didn't need to watch every detail. I only needed to grasp the overall story. RG was Richard, a rich CEO who had been married multiple times. Next up was HD from October 25th, 2005. It was clear Sarah had been busy in October. HD, or Harold as she called him, was another interesting character. He felt excitement when Sarah led him around playfully, demonstrating a dynamic that would probably surprise Harold's customers at his car lots, or even his good Christian wife and 6 kids. Each video finished with a warning from Sarah. It was obvious to me that she was trying to distance herself from her past before our upcoming wedding. I hesitated before starting the first of the AK videos from June 2006. According to Sarah's notes, Alaska was a regular client. Why? What made him special? Why were there 3 videos? Did she really care about him? Did she love him? I realized the only way to find answers was to watch the first video, but I still felt unsure. They can't be worse than what you've seen already, I reminded myself. Just get it over with. AK stood for Artie. He looked familiar. I paused the video on the first scene, focusing on Artie's face to study it. Where had I seen him before? I couldn't remember until I pressed play and watched Artie turn. His side view looked familiar. He was the man from the Ferrari, the one who drove with the blonde. That blonde turned out to be Sarah wearing a wig. The first video showed me that pain can come in different ways. It was less intense, but I recognized the master bedroom from our first house. Sarah, how could she do this? She had brought him into our bed. It felt like a serious betrayal. How could she let him into our home? And what was up with this guy? He kept expressing his affection for Sarah, emphasizing how much he wanted to share a future with her. If my kids hadn't looked so much like me, I would have been worried. Thankfully, James looked just like me, and the girls both reminded me of my sister at their ages. Sarah didn't have much say in how our kids looked. She had deep black hair, true to her Irish roots, but our children were different. They had light blonde hair and bright blue eyes, and Artie was a striking redhead. I walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I was putting off what I had to do, but I could only delay for so long. I headed back to the living room. DVD 2 was waiting for me. I noticed the date on the screen, August 2013. Sarah was pregnant with Jenny back then. How could she be with someone else while she was having a baby with me? How could she do that when she was still caring for our little boy? And why had there been such a long break between films? So many questions, not enough answers. I shook my head in frustration and pressed play, preparing myself for more pain from my wife. What new surprise would I find this time? It was as hurtful as I had feared. She hadn't shared anything too personal with him in our bed, but they had been in what was once a guest room and was now Cindy's room. He did his usual comforting while talking about babies. Instead of being close to her, he sat on her legs while she lay on the bed. He moved against Sarah's chest and rested his hand on her round belly. It was evident he felt very excited, especially since she was expecting a baby. His gaze shifted between Sarah underneath him and a photo of us on the nightstand. I felt uneasy. Why was a picture of us in the guest room? I had wondered about this when Sarah decorated, and I thought about it even more now. Did Sarah find some pleasure in it? Like she did with that SJ guy from the first video? Did it somehow excite her to be with a man while looking at me through a photo? She tilted her head and gently touched the glass frame before holding it close to her. With a soft sigh, she set the frame back on the bedside table, kissed her fingers, and touched them lightly to the glass. I watched as she stood up and walked toward the camera. As she got closer, her shape looked different, and then the screen turned dark. In this movie, unlike the others, Sarah didn't talk to the camera. Instead, it felt like she was making subtle gestures, suggesting awareness of being observed. Why was that? Like many other things I had learned, I now had even more questions than when I began. As I put all 6 horror movies back in the hidden closet, a new thought came to me. I had married someone very different. Without the clues I now had, I never would have guessed my wife could be involved in what the movies showed. Feeling dazed, I went to pick up the kids. Once again, my sister had invited us to dinner. While the kids played nearby, I quietly shared what I had learned. It wasn't good news. I hadn't paid much attention to the movies or looked closely at the records, but I could see one clear truth. I had married a very smart and talented actress who, when we first met, had worked in a very different line of work. At the beginning, she charged a low price. I didn't know how long her meetings lasted, so I couldn't tell how low that price really was. Over time, she raised her fees to match her value in her eyes. I figured paying for company was like buying art. It's all about how much someone is willing to spend. Sarah was very attractive. Imagine Kate Beckinsale and you'll understand. She was also open to different interests, which I guess is why men were willing to pay a lot for her time. After we met, and I fell deeply in love, she began to let go of her clients. I suspected those clients were wealthy and powerful people in the city. They needed to be careful with their money to pay someone like Sarah, a charming, private woman who accepted their unusual requests. Did they lose everything? Sadly, no. Whoever AK was, he had made it through the tough times. From the expensive gifts he was giving her, it seemed he was quite generous. If she sold the fancy car, diamond ring, and gold bars, she could live comfortably for a long time. My sister asked the question I had been avoiding. What was I going to do about all of this? My first thought was to part ways with her for being so dishonest and for her secret life. I felt angry about Sarah's betrayal and her long lies, pushing away other feelings for now. In a way, I didn't want my anger to fade. Being very angry felt better than being heartbroken. Talking with my sister about the current divorce laws led to a grim realization. Sarah would probably keep the hidden money and have a nice sum saved up for herself. While she stayed in my house, she would take care of my kids and live off the money I gave her, all while possibly still being involved with her older partner. The idea of being away from my kids was too hard to think about. I needed to find a way to avoid that. Keeping my kids close became the most important goal in my plans. If that meant sharing my life with her for now, then I would accept it. Carrie helped me see things more clearly. I thought I would have control over my own future. But what if I didn't? What did Sarah really want? With her resources and connections, would I have any role in what was to come? The last video I saw of her with that older man made me wonder if she cared about me at all. Was I part of her future in a positive way? Or was it more complicated? Did she have two sides, one loving and one self-focused? Was my future in the hands of whichever side was in charge? Once more, Sis challenged my way of thinking. What if it was Sarah who was struggling? In today's world, is it true that luck only smiles on those who already have money? It feels like it has always been this way, right? The rule of the 21st century seems to be that those who have the money get to make the rules. After dinner, I happily accepted my sister's offer to stay the night with me and my kids. This would help me focus on what I needed to do and look at the ledgers more closely. Once the kids were tucked in bed, we talked about something I had thought about during the drive over. Did I need to call her aunt in England to check if Sarah really never spent a week a year with her? In the end, we decided it wasn't necessary. If I was right, Sarah had contacted her aunt between the end of her cruise and when my dear wife came home. Sarah surely prepared herself with pictures and good stories before returning. Whether her aunt knew about her plans didn't really matter. Sarah would be ready for a big surprise when she returned, and I wanted her to be caught off guard. I wanted her to feel surprised, just like I had when I made my discovery. With that in mind, Sis began to read. Her goal? To figure out if I was part of Sarah's future plans. After 2 hours, Sis reached 2008, and the safe was empty of gold, jewelry, Sarah's rings, the Ferrari title, and cash. Those items were stored in waterproof camping tubs, buried under the compost pile. I would check in the daylight to see if my hiding place was convincing. Now I had the upper hand. I hoped that if things got tough, my resources would balance out Sarah's legal advantages. If it came to that, of course. My plans were still changing. I joined Sis, and together we finished looking through the ledgers. Our conclusion? I was right about the situation. Sarah had several clients up until we got engaged, and only one since our wedding. The earlier records helped us match some initials to the movies they appeared in. From her small talks at the end of each video, except for AK's last one, we knew Sarah expected challenges with letting some clients go. It was clever of her to record a session to keep them quiet and stop them from approaching her if they saw her out with her happy family. I didn't recognize any of the places from the first 3 videos. Maybe she didn't want to show where she lived to those clients. But all 3 videos of AK were filmed at our home. Sarah was smart. I didn't think she would meet him there often, as it posed too much risk. The 3rd AK video suggested that he enjoyed making me uncomfortable. I could imagine the pressure he put on Sarah regarding their meetings. We could only speculate that AK knew where she lived, so there was no need to conceal that. Setting up a secret camera at home is really easy. Sarah's secret life had gone on for a long time, mostly because she only had one client. He was very kind to her, even though there was no proof that she cared for him. If the last video showed anything, it was that she might even find him less than appealing. It was remarkable how long she maintained her situation. She began charging $1,500 each time she met him, which was usually every Wednesday. Of course, that didn't happen during school holidays or when she had other plans. Sometimes it seemed like she met him less when she had her period. That would explain why she only had about 3 meetings most months. Each year, she pretended to spend a week with her aunt, but really either stayed at his house or traveled somewhere with him. Either way, he was spending about $20,000 a year. The records clearly showed his payments. Special notes showed us dates when he gave her a large cash bonus of $100,000 a month after Jamie was born, and a significant ring just after Jenny was born. Then there was a Ferrari while she was pregnant with Cindy. Both gifts were carefully recorded. There were also withdrawals from petty cash for special items. Suddenly, the short note I had read about one withdrawal made sense. VS stood for Victoria's Secret, and Ling was short for lingerie. It was hard to tell if Sarah bought the pretty items for her partner or just for herself. After all, they had been together for more than 10 years. After that long, couples need to find ways to keep their relationship engaging. Every few pages had receipts showing when Sarah traded cash for gold. The amounts were small, just under the limit that might have caught the attention of anyone looking into shady dealings. I would have been impressed by her cleverness and planning if it weren't for her talent for trickery. There were just a few money entries we couldn't understand. The most puzzling one happened last month. It was a withdrawal of $20,000 that came right after AK's $20,000 payment. All it had in the comments was the initials HM. Did she buy something significant? Was someone trying to blackmail her? None of the paperwork explained this strange charge. While I was trying to figure this out, I saw Carrie looking at pictures of the kids on the wall in the family room. Then she glanced at me. When I asked her about it, she brought up something I had thought about after watching the first AK movie, the question of who the biological father of my children was. She even went to the sideboard, got an old family photo album of us as kids, and spent 10 minutes comparing our features at the same ages. I was glad to see that she noticed the same family resemblance that I did. It was comforting because I realized I couldn't trust my own feelings. Then I understood how important the morning after pills were and why Sarah kept track of her cycle. Thank goodness. Sarah seemed to care about our family in that way. But still, mistakes can happen. I decided, no matter how much we looked alike, it was wise to get some DNA and health tests done. Since we couldn't find out more for now, we made a plan. We would wait for Sarah to return and talk to her. What else could we do? It was Thursday night, and she wouldn't be back until Sunday night. I had already decided to take Monday off. My sister agreed to help with the kids on Sunday and get them to school on Monday. The rest was out of our hands. Before bed, I shared some clips from one of the videos with Carrie. She also thought the guy looked somewhat familiar, but couldn't remember his name. What I did for the rest of that week is hard to remember now. Thank goodness for the kids and their daily routines. I was grateful for my children's needs and their constant questions. They kept me steady. Loving them made it hard to feel my anger because, as much as they were part of me, they were also part of Sarah. I missed my anger. It helped me handle things more easily. I felt distracted and more nervous as Sunday approached. I was sure Sarah would call on Saturday saying she was back in touch, but that call never came. After I dropped the kids off on Sunday, I sat down and got ready for what I had to face. I had a plan in my mind, but it didn't matter. Sarah didn't show up. She didn't reach out on Monday either. Not a word from her. Now I was very angry, and that came with another feeling. Worry. With no news and no other options, I reported her as missing on Monday afternoon. I stuck to what Sarah had told me, not mentioning anything about her other life. From their reactions, it was clear they thought she was just another wife who had left. I received a message that said, "Don't contact us, we will reach out to you." I made sure the kids did not see my worry. I just told them that she was running late. I decided to take the rest of the week off from work. On Wednesday, I was brought back to reality by the loud sound of brakes outside. I looked out the window and saw my sister rushing to the door, holding a newspaper. She calmed down enough to show me page 5. The headline read, "Private local millionaire opens new shelter for women." The article said he had given money for the shelter, but I could hardly think about that. I couldn't take my eyes off the pictures. Arthur Kindred, AK. He looked pretty much the same as in Sarah's last video, except this time he was fully dressed. His wife stood beside him, looking unhappy. She seemed much younger than him at first glance, even with her frown. She fit the picture of a bored, rich wife, always perfectly styled and made up. But if you looked closer, the age difference wasn't as big as it seemed. She had just used a bit of help from doctors to stay looking young. She was attractive, or at least she had been long ago. Now she seemed like a faded flower trying to regain its bright colors from the past. Arthur Kindred was very wealthy. I mean, he was really rich. He was also known for avoiding the spotlight unless he needed good press for something he wanted. That's why he felt familiar, but he wasn't always on my mind. It also explained the fancy Ferrari. For him, anything under $1 million was just pocket change. He didn't even show up when he donated his Gulfstream 550 for fun flights on Fair Day every year. I felt a thrill of excitement. Now I had a name. I finally got an address. But then reality hit me hard. I had a name now, but it brought up a problem. This man could help me find out where my wife was. But if I acted on this information, I would have to tell the police more than I wanted to. If something had happened to Sarah, I would look suspicious if I mentioned I knew about her boyfriend. In the end, I decided I had to check things out on my own. I said goodbye to my sister, put my daughter Cindy in the car, and drove to Arthur Kindred's house. Kindred's house was huge, almost like a small palace behind tall gates. I parked across the street and tried to see if I could look inside. I couldn't. While I thought about my next step, a silver Lexus pulled up to the gates. Mrs. Kindred got out of the driver's seat to check the mailbox. I recognized her by her shiny, well-dyed blonde hair. Cindy, from her spot in the back seat, said clearly, "Auntie Jean." Anger almost took over me again. The woman knew my daughter. My unfaithful wife must have brought Cindy here. How far would Sarah's betrayal go? How low could these people be? I revved the engine, crossed the street, and parked behind the Lexus. Mrs. Kindred looked pale, but she didn't move. I opened my door and started yelling before I was even out. "Can you please tell me how my little girl knows you?" I saw her glance at my car. Cindy, not understanding, waved at her. I noticed the color fade from Mrs. Kindred's face as she stammered, "This has nothing to do with me. You need to ask my husband." She turned and walked back to the driver's side of her car. "Is he here?" I shouted. "No, he left this morning. He'll be back this weekend. Now please leave or I will call the police." With that and a strange look on her face, she drove through the gate, which closed behind her. I couldn't understand her expression. What was going on? Was she just feeling uneasy? Was she scared? Was she mad? None of those words seemed to fit right. Jean Kindred knew more than she was letting on about where Sarah was. I was sure of that, but I couldn't talk to her or her husband in a way they couldn't avoid me. With no better idea, I decided to go home. Cindy said she had been to the big house many times. I really hoped she wasn't visiting her dad there. I stopped and picked up some DNA test kits. The kids might look like me and Carrie, but I really needed something real, something I could trust. After everything I had learned, it was clear that my life was not what I thought it was. To make a long story short, I didn't go back to the mansion that weekend. It was all over the news that night. Arthur Kindred, a well-known local helper and good person, had his private plane crash in the next state. There were no survivors. How much worse could things get? When would I catch a break? I was left wondering how I would find out what was happening with Sarah. My only hope was to talk to Jean Kindred. They found 2 bodies in the wreckage. Both were men. I was surprised. I thought maybe one would be a woman. A mix of relief, anger, fear, and frustration churned in my stomach. It was hard to feel both hope and sadness about my wife being alive and dead at the same time. People were guessing about the plane crash, waiting to find out who was on board. Many thought the bodies were those of Arthur Kindred and his pilot. The plane was headed to Brisbane for gas before going to Mexico, where Mr. Kindred had some businesses. I was shocked when I saw a silver Lexus pull into my driveway on Saturday morning. Why was Arthur Kindred's widow visiting me now after she tried so hard to stay away from me before? I watched her walk up to the door. I quietly asked my sister to take the kids to play in the backyard. Carrie didn't ask any questions. She quickly gathered the children and took them outside. I heard the back door click shut just as the front doorbell rang. With every step the widow took toward my door, my mind raced with thoughts. Maybe she came to tell me where Sarah was. Or maybe she was here to say that Sarah was gone for good. Maybe she wanted to see just how much I really knew. Would she pay me to stay quiet? I wasn't sure what to think about any of this. Mrs. Kindred. What a surprise. Mike, I hope you don't mind, but I never knew Sarah's last name after she got married. Would it be okay if I came in? I have a few things to talk about. I stepped aside to let her in. She walked in, her heels clicking on the shiny floor. She stopped where the hallway opened, waiting for me to show her where to go. I pointed to the left, toward the living room. Please make yourself comfortable. Would you like something to drink? A glass of water, please? I filled a glass for myself, too. After giving her the water, I sat down across from her. She took a sip, put her glass on the coffee table, and straightened her back. Taking a deep breath, she looked me in the eye. Her face looked serious, and there was something else about it that I couldn't quite understand. I guess you're curious about why I came here, she said. You mentioned you wanted to talk about some things with me. She gave a shy smile. Yes, I did. I stayed quiet and looked into her eyes. She cleared her throat and then let out a nervous laugh. If you had told me when I first got married that I would be here in someone's living room talking about what I'm about to say, I would have thought you were out of your mind. I smiled back, though it didn't really reach my eyes. I thought that being friendly might help her move on to the real topic. Can I take a guess from your visit earlier this week that you know about Arthur and my wife's connection? I nodded, not wanting to show how much I really understood. I was eager to find out how much she really knew. Did you harm my husband? Her direct question caught me off guard, and my mouth opened in surprise. I quickly regained my composure, and my words came out sharply. Listen, lady. Your husband died in a plane crash. Yes and no. I raised my eyebrow, trying to keep my feelings in check. Yes, the plane crashed, but it wasn't because of any problems with the plane or the pilot. They found evidence of a bomb. Don't ask me how I know, well, not official. He was murdered. This time I fought to stay calm, but it was hard. Murder? I felt my life slipping away from me. Panic clashed with anger. Finally, anger took over. So, what does that have to do with me? Well, some might think that learning your wife had a secret relationship with my husband could make someone want to kill. The same could be said for you. A crime of passion, perhaps? And with what you might gain, you could be the main suspect. I can't help but wonder if you're here to distract me from those thoughts. Like you want to stop me from going to the police with an idea like that. She pressed her lips together. I have known about Arthur and Sarah for many years. Why would I want to hurt him now? Maybe you've just reached your limit. Maybe they did something that pushed you too far. Perhaps you learned he was planning to leave you. Or maybe you were just waiting for the right moment. Maybe you thought you could blame me. I can't say for sure. You tell me. Jean Kindred let out a harsh laugh, not very ladylike, but I could sense a hint of worry behind her tough act. That's nonsense. Like I said, young man, I have known the truth for years, while you've only found out recently if I'm right, and I believe I am. The police might think it's quite strange that Arthur died less than a day after you came to my house looking for him. They might also find it curious that you were okay with your husband paying someone for things he should be doing with you, and now that person is also missing. Don't be so gullible. Many rich men have a girlfriend while their wives look the other way. I stared at her with anger. Sorry, I forgot. You're wealthy. Normal rules don't apply to you. She flinched a little. Is that why you killed him? For the last time, I did not kill your husband. Did you? She sighed like she was annoyed, but there was something in her voice that didn't feel right. I've already said I had no reason to. I've known about those two for a long time. Why would I come to you and ask if you killed Arthur if I did it? I noticed she didn't just say no. Well, they say the best way to defend yourself is to attack, I replied. This isn't helping, Mike. I'm not going to admit to a crime I didn't commit just to fit your story. What do you know? Why should I tell you anything? She huffed again, clearly frustrated. I realized she was someone used to having her way, and I wasn't following her orders. I needed some details from her without revealing what I already knew. How could I do that? All right, Mrs. Kindred, why don't you tell me what you know about my wife and your husband? I'll let you know if I'm already aware of that part. She looked at me closely, thinking it over. After a moment, she sighed and agreed. Okay. I was surprised she said yes, but I didn't want to argue. She took a drink of her water and cleared her throat. Sarah faced some financial challenges in college. To manage them, she sought alternative measures. She once told me she appreciated the sense of empowerment it brought her. Plus, the financial aspect was appealing. Arthur began engaging with Sarah in 2003. She paused, raising an eyebrow. The financial issues in college were new to me, but I nodded anyway. I understand. Sarah attempted to end things with him in 2006, but Arthur convinced her to continue. I understand. I wasn't sure about that before, but it made sense when I thought about the timeline of the first video. The second video was made while Sarah was expecting Jenny. Perhaps Sarah considered ending the arrangement after the baby arrived since we had planned for 2 children. But something must have influenced her decision after that video, as we ended up having Cindy, and she even expressed interest in wanting a 4th child. I kept my thoughts to myself. Jean Kindred didn't need to hear them. Arthur couldn't have children, so he was very focused on it. Over time, he encouraged Sarah to become pregnant. He provided substantial support when she had Jamie. I flinched when I heard Jamie's name, but nodded in response. I couldn't help but ask, if Arthur wanted to be a dad so much, why didn't you consider other ways when you found out he couldn't have kids? Arthur was a proud man. He didn't want to accept that we couldn't have children because of him. Jean Kindred looked away, clearly uneasy. After sitting up straight, she went on, by that time I was aware of some of his preferences and I wasn't sure I could stay married to him, so I played along with what he believed. Honestly, if he hadn't had Sarah, I might have left. Thanks, I said, trying hard not to sound sarcastic. It's nice to know my wife played a part in keeping things as they were. Jean Kindred flinched. I noticed the color rise in her face. Her expression of discomfort gave me a quick but strong sense of satisfaction. Well, moving on, she said. Arthur encouraged Sarah to get pregnant again, and when she had Jenny, he gifted her a diamond ring. I had braced myself for her mentioning Jenny and managed not to react. At the same time, I almost admired how Sarah navigated the situation. She influenced Arthur into giving her a significant diamond ring for something she was already planning to do. I nodded as Jean Kindred continued. I think you did not want more kids, but I guess Sarah is as persuasive as Arthur since you ended up having Cindy. I felt a surge of frustration brewing inside me, tightening my throat. Yes, she can be convincing, and let me guess, Arthur gave her a luxury car? Kindred nodded in response. I struggled to control my anger. The thought that I now had 3 lovely children just because a greedy old man had influenced my wife was almost too much to take. Children should come from love, not coercion. I heard Arthur offered her an apartment if she could make you agree to have 1 more child. I turned away to keep my frustration hidden. I know. So you know everything then? Not really. I don't understand why you are being so, well, kind, understanding. Mr. Mike, I didn't like it either. I felt quite upset about it. It was embarrassing, but it relieved some of the pressure regarding Arthur's demands, so I put up with it. You mean you gave up part of yourself for a comfortable life? She lifted her chin and stared at me, but she didn't argue back. I wondered why she wasn't standing up for herself. So, Mike, it seems we're at an impasse. You think I harmed Arthur, and I think you did. We both had reasons to act. No matter what, being looked into is not good for either of us. Neither is the attention. Think about your kids. Wow. You really act like you're a sad wife, don't you? Arthur destroyed any affection I had for him a long time ago, but that doesn't mean I harmed him, and it also doesn't mean I shouldn't receive what is due to me because of his passing. I nodded. In a way, I couldn't argue with her reasoning. She had probably earned her inheritance many times over. Let me tell you where I stand, Jean. Can I call you Jean? Jean nodded. Jean, I will keep quiet with the reporters on 2 conditions. First, don't mention my name to the police just to distract them from you. If you really are innocent, proving it should be easy. And even if you did something questionable, you should be able to keep yourself out of trouble. Second, tell me what you know about Sarah's disappearance. After facing another sharp look from Jean, she started to speak. Arthur took Sarah to Mexico in his plane and returned without her. When I asked him where Sarah was, he said he left her in a bad place for a week. What? I exclaimed, jumping up. It's true. He said he did it because she wanted to end their arrangement by blackmailing him with some embarrassing videos. Plus, he wanted her to tell you everything for a long time. Finally, he was trying to persuade her to have another child. He laughed and said he was not just solving 2 problems at once, but 3. He was on his way to Mexico to pick her up when his plane crashed. What? You want me to get involved? Why? Clearly, he doesn't know me well. What would stop me from going public and revealing his secrets? This helped me understand why Sarah had a photo of us in the guest room. I could picture Arthur Kindred pushing Sarah to be close to him in our home, and since this was where we wanted to live, she probably tried to resist. They might have agreed to keep a photo of us on display in the extra room instead. I think there are 2 reasons behind this. He always said that after earning about $50 million, money loses its meaning. After that, it's all about having control. What could feel more powerful than using that control to be close to a man's wife right in front of him, knowing he can't do anything? Plus, he could spend time with Sarah whenever he wanted without having to hide. He thought that giving you $1 million would make you quiet and get you to agree about child 4. So just like many men who chase money, he thought it would work on me too. Yes, he thought everyone could be bought. It's clear my wife was one of those people, I said, feeling angry. I frowned, unhappy that I showed my anger to someone like Jean Kindred. I took a deep breath to keep my voice calm. So why did he take such drastic steps when she tried to back out? With his money, why didn't he just offer Sarah more cash or gifts or find someone else? Jean looked away, thinking about her answer. I could tell she had made up her mind when she sighed, looking resigned. As much as I hate to say it, he loved her in a complicated way. I don't need to tell you about Arthur's strange interests, but did you know he even convinced himself the kids were really his? The focus on a specific interest was intense. A new woman would mean starting from scratch, and she might not be as careful as Sarah. Bringing in someone new could harm his reputation as a generous person. Arthur thought that scaring Sarah into obeying him by leaving her in a difficult situation in Mexico was the best choice. I sank into the armchair. This was overwhelming. I didn't know what I had expected, but this was too strange. A rough place? Mexico? It felt like a movie scene. Oh, don't look at me that way. They had strict orders not to harm her or let anyone else interfere. She was just there to understand the consequences of non-compliance. My husband can be very harsh sometimes. Remember our deal, Mike. No media. All I could do was nod. I was speechless. Okay, I'll leave now. With every click of Jean Kindred's shoes as she walked away, I winced. They were like nails in my coffin. My coffin. Before her visit, I felt hurt, confused, angry, disappointed, and frustrated. Now I felt trapped. Jean Kindred had confirmed all my fears. She had proven my worst worries true. When I heard the front door close, I lowered my head. My fate was sealed. I could never forget Sarah's lies and tricks. I could never go back to thinking she was always honest. I could never believe she truly cared for me like I cared for her since that first moment we shared. I would never have the certainty that she was on my side. From now on, I would always have doubts. For the rest of my life, I would have questions. Everything we shared, every talk, every kind word, every promise, how much of it was real? How much was just Sarah pretending? I never knew, and that hurt me just as much as her breaking my trust. The sound of my children's happy laughter pulled me back to reality, and I lifted my head. No matter how I felt inside, they needed me. I had to be strong for them. My sadness could wait. I stretched my neck from side to side to help ease the tightness, trying to think clearly. Why did Jean Kindred feel she had to talk to me? If she really believed I was guilty of murder, she was putting herself in danger. And if, as I thought, she was involved in her husband's death, she was taking a huge risk by visiting a man who had reported his own wife missing. A wife connected to her deceased husband. Did I mess up her perfect plan when I confronted her earlier this week? Was she really worried about her reputation? Did she have more to hide than just her involvement in the events? And what about Sarah? What should I do about her? How was I going to get her out of Mexico when I didn't even know where Arthur Kindred had left her? And even if I brought her back to Australia, what would we do next? I had a troubling thought that crept into my tired mind. I tried to push it away, but it stuck around like a shadow, spreading and making things worse. No, I told myself, that's not me, Mike. But it wouldn't go away. Did I really want to rescue Sarah from that place? Before I could shake off that strange thought, my sister and the kids came rushing in. Without saying a word, we put aside the talk about Jean Kindred and focused on bathing the kids and cooking dinner. Jean's words kept playing in my head, mixing with memories of Sarah. Those were harsh words and troubling memories. I hated how they messed up my time with my children. Wow, I thought Cindy would never calm down, Carrie said as she flopped onto the couch, tucking her feet under her. So, what did the sad widow say? I'm not sure where to begin, I replied, handing her a glass of wine. Start from the beginning, Mike. Tell me exactly what she said, and then we can talk about it. I shared the conversation as best as I could. I stumbled a bit when I talked about where Sarah was. Carrie's sharp breath told me everything. Jean promised me they were told not to make her work or anything, but still. What will you do? Do you have a plan? How does someone save people from difficult situations in Mexico? I don't know the answers to any of those. All right, let's put the rescue plans aside. When Sarah is back in Australia, what do you want to do? I have no idea, Carrie sighed. You really don't know much, Mike. You need to start making some choices. You need a plan. I know, but I can't make sense of it all. I can't bring together the Sarah of the ledgers and fancy cars with the Sarah I've loved for 12 years. One moment, I see Sarah in her comfy yoga pants, making pancakes on a Sunday morning. Then I imagine her all dressed up, shining in diamonds and wearing a fancy dress in a secret room. It's hard for me to believe she is the same person. I get it, Carrie said. Her two different lives have confused me too. She paused to take a sip of her wine. Maybe we should go back to the basics and list the good and bad things. I nodded. I didn't know what else to say. So we wrote everything down. In the end, the list of reasons to get a divorce looked pretty bad. It had some big issues, like trust and feeling betrayed. I had to admit that my pride and ego were also part of the problem. On the other side, reasons not to divorce included losing a big part of my money, paying alimony, paying for the kids, and having to live in a small apartment. But those worries seemed small compared to the emotional issues. How could I manage being a father who only sees his kids on weekends? How could I stand not being with them every day? I loved reading them bedtime stories. I loved putting them to bed, enjoying those quiet moments when they felt warm and safe, smelling sweet and fresh. Even if I told the courts about Sarah's hidden life, there was still a good chance they would give her custody. I can't believe what I'm going to say, but just say it, sis. Have you thought about not saving Sarah? What? I looked at Carrie in shock, as if she had just said something really strange. She was usually the kindest person I knew. I couldn't believe she spoke out loud what I had only thought. Is it any worse than how she's treated you since your first date? She's been unfaithful from the start. She's lied to you every day you've been together. I believe that according to divorce law, if she doesn't come back after 2 years, you can end the marriage because she left. This would help you keep what you have worked for and protect your time with the kids. Is leaving her in Mexico really worse than how she has treated you over the years? You could always talk to Jean Kindred to ensure that Sarah is safe. Would it be harder for the kids than going through a divorce? I took a sip of my wine, thinking about what Carrie said. Even though I understood how much Sarah had lied and hurt me, and even though Carrie's words made sense, could I really do that to Sarah? Could I leave her in Mexico? I turned my head to the side and looked at the clock radio. The numbers shone a dull green. It was 12:27 a.m. I sighed and turned away, trying to forget the annoying numbers. Sleep just wouldn't come. Carrie's words kept echoing in my mind. She's been unfaithful since the start. Have you thought about not helping Sarah? Would that really hurt the kids more than a divorce? Sarah had hurt me in the worst way possible. The pain she caused made me doubt if I would ever heal completely. I found myself questioning every moment we shared over the last 12 years. The Sarah in my memories felt like a stranger now, but the Sarah who had celebrated our children's births in my arms was someone I loved deeply. I loved her with all my heart. Why did she keep going after we got engaged? I could somewhat understand her using her looks to get out of a tough spot. I might not agree with her choices, but I could see why she might do it. But after we got engaged, after we got married, that I could never grasp. Images of Sarah from our past together shifted to scenes of her driving her fancy car with a blonde wig. I saw her in her favorite white sundress, and later in a beautiful gown from the special room. Which Sarah was the real one? How could I ever be sure? How could I trust anything she said again? How would I know when she was being sincere and when she was just pretending? One thing I was sure of, no matter why she wanted to have our children, she loved them. That was real. Not knowing who my wife was, what she wanted, or where our kids and I fit in troubled me. I needed to find out. I had to know the truth. Something kept bothering me. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I sensed the answer was in the special room. Without thinking, I got up and stepped onto the cool floor. Holding the baby monitor, I walked down to Sarah's sewing room. I decided to go through the envelopes and loose papers first. I didn't really know what I was looking for, but I believed I would recognize it when I saw it. I grabbed the latest ledger and quickly opened it. As I did, some loose papers fell to the floor. I almost ignored them, but something made me look down. The words jumped out at me. For sale. Designs for life. A graphic design studio in the inner city looking for a new owner. I started to think quickly. She was going to use some of her money to buy me my own design studio. She had been working hard for us, for me. I might not agree with how she made that money, but she did it for her family. I dropped to my knees. My eyes felt wet with unshed tears. I did have a place in Sarah's future. She did love me. A wave of love and relief rushed through me. Gene Kindred's words echoed in my mind. He had spoken about her trying to end their deal by threatening him. Sarah wanted to leave. She seemed to think she had put in enough effort. It was unclear how she would tell me about the money. Maybe it was from an aunt who had passed away or a lucky lottery ticket. Either way, she wanted to move on. It was hard to say if our marriage would survive. How could I forget the pictures of her with her clients? How could I ever trust her again after she had deceived me for so long? Even though she had hurt me deeply, I didn't want her to suffer like this. I needed to help her. I had to rescue her from the place she was trapped in. I hoped Gene Kindred would know where Arthur had taken Sarah. In the case of Shaw versus Shaw, I rule in favor of Mr. Shaw and allow the divorce due to abandonment. Michael Shaw will keep all 3 children and everything we own together. The judge's words faded away. It was over. I was no longer married to Sarah. I was free now. But instead of feeling happy, I felt a sense of sadness. I turned to look at Carrie. She smiled at me, trying to offer comfort. With the kids safely in bed, I poured myself a drink and sat outside on the porch. The night was lovely, but I hardly noticed, lost in my thoughts. I leaned back and shut my eyes, the same worries swirling in my mind as they had for the past 2 years. Did I make the right choice? Did I really have a say in it? What kind of life had I imposed on Sarah? I felt a chill as I recalled that night, the night I finally understood Sarah's intentions. I went to bed feeling relieved, but was soon startled awake by a bright light shining in my face. I replayed the scene in my mind. In the darkness, I could see a man dressed in all black, with a mask covering his face, sitting on the edge of my bed. He was holding something that caught the light, and I noticed a sense of danger in the air. "Hello, Mr. Shaw. You have a nice place here." His casual words felt strange compared to the situation. I stared at him, speechless. I realized that Gene Kindred likely wanted to eliminate me, just as she had done with Sarah and her husband. The thought terrified me. I felt like I was staring at my end. My first concern was my kids, and I immediately begged him to spare their lives. "Please don't harm my children. They are innocent in all of this." "I'm not here to harm you or your children, at least not yet, Mr. Can I call you Mike?" I nodded, carefully sitting up. I felt unsure. Why was he here if not to hurt me? "So, Mike, where's your lovely wife? She and I had a meeting today, but she didn't show up. I hope she's not trying to back out of our agreement." I stared at him, not understanding. He raised an eyebrow and slightly adjusted his position. "I don't know where Sarah is. She's been missing for over a week. I reported it to the police." "That's not good, Mike. Sarah was supposed to pay me the rest of the money she owes. What will we do about that?" "What?" I shook my head in confusion. "Sarah owed you money? How much? For what?" As I asked, my mind began to piece together the information. We had a, business deal, half paid up front, the rest when it was done. Let's just say the job is finished. "A business deal? What job?" Mike, the man said firmly. "If Sarah wanted you to know what was going on, she would have told you. All you need to know is that I am owed $20,000. Let your wife know. I will be back tomorrow at 2 to collect it. But I don't know where Sarah is. I can't give her any message." "Then you will have to pay for her." He stood up and leaned closer, his presence imposing. "Say this, Mike. 20,000 at 2 o'clock. I repeated what he said. He walked calmly to the door as if he had all the time in the world. I didn't even think to act against him when he had his back turned. Something told me he was tough. At the door, he turned back. "Oh, and Mike? Your kids are nice. Real sweet. I checked on them before I woke you for our little talk." Hearing this, I jumped out of bed, the sound of his soft laughter still ringing in my ears as he walked down the stairs. One by one, I checked on the kids. I cried tears of relief when I saw they were all asleep and safe. As the shock faded, I started to shake. My legs felt weak as I walked to the family room. I tried to understand what he had said, but my thoughts were all jumbled. I forced myself to focus. Then, I remembered the strange $20,000 entry in Sarah's records, half before the job, half after. Now it was clear. HM stood for Hitman, and he wanted his money. The task was to take care of Arthur Kindred like he was nothing important. I felt sick to my stomach. All the strange looks I had seen on Jean Kindred's face now made sense. She had looked embarrassed and scared at the same time. No wonder I couldn't figure it out back then. I had been so wrong. It wasn't Jean Kindred who had planned to have her husband removed. It was Sarah. I shook my head again and again, not wanting to accept the truth. Even with everything Sarah had done, her lies, her deceit, her betrayal, I found it hard to believe she could actually be involved in such a serious matter. But she could. The man's words proved it. We had a business deal. The main thing is that I am owed $20,000, half paid up front and half when the job is done. $20,000 by 2 o'clock p.m. What could cause someone to take such drastic measures? I could see any mother or father doing anything to protect their loved ones, but to want to remove another person without justification. What kind of person would do that? Sarah had been with Arthur Kindred for more than 10 years, and everyone said he had been good to her. She had even shared close moments with him. So why would she want him gone? The only answer I could find was from Jean Kindred's words. Sarah had tried to end their arrangement again, and Arthur clearly wasn't going to let her leave without a struggle. Sarah wanted to end things, but Arthur wasn't letting go. Did that make it okay for her to plan his removal? Not in my opinion. It seemed he wasn't a danger to me or the kids, only to Sarah and her secret. She had taken a man's life to keep the truth from coming out. That was really unsettling. Could she act toward me with the same cold thinking? I spent the night awake. The next morning, I got the kids off to school and dropped Cindy off at Carrie's. I didn't tell Carrie about what happened. There would be time for that later. With some money from the hidden room, I prepared an envelope for the hitman. This was strange in many ways. Arthur Kindred had, in a way, paid for his own fate, facing the worst outcome for being in a relationship with Sarah. And Sarah? At that moment, she was stuck in a difficult situation because her hired hitman had acted when Arthur was on his way to free her. It was her choice that led to her being trapped, not mine or Arthur's. She had brought this on herself. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. "Hello, Mike." Knowing why he was at my door and what he did for a living made his overly friendly attitude feel unsettling. I held the envelope in my hand but didn't give it to him right away. My heart was racing as I asked the question that had kept me awake all night. How can I trust you won't come back for more money after I pay what Sarah owes? His friendly smile faded, replaced by surprise and then irritation. I'm a professional, Mike. Sarah and I had a deal. "Once you give me that envelope, our business will be finished." I nodded and handed him the cash, hoping I wasn't making a big mistake. After all, how reliable can a man be who lives outside the law? I watched him leave. Maybe it was just my nerves or his job, but everything about him felt risky. His words from the night before echoed in my mind. Oh, and Mike. The kids are great, really adorable. I took a look at them before waking you for our talk. I had a feeling that for the right amount of money, he wouldn't think twice about causing harm, and Sarah had brought him into our lives, into the lives of our kids, our sweet, innocent children. Knowing this made everything else she did seem small in comparison. No matter how significant her years of lies were, or how much it hurt to think about her betrayals, none of that was as troubling as her putting our kids at risk. That was something I couldn't overlook. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. One of my main jobs as a father is to keep my children safe. It was daunting to realize I had to protect them from their own mother. Sarah had done something so serious that, if she had been caught and faced a group of regular people, she would likely face serious consequences. One small mistake had landed her in a troubling situation, stuck in a place where people went for entertainment. This felt like a fitting consequence for her choices. Taking a deep breath, I pulled myself back to the here and now and took a sip of my drink. I love my kids more than anything and would do whatever it takes to keep them safe. I knew it would take time for me to feel okay about leaving Sarah in that situation. This was the price I had to pay as a father. Epilogue: Jean Kindred could not escape the questions about her husband's death. The police were doing their job thoroughly. Even though she didn't do anything wrong and there were no charges against her, enough rumors circulated that her old friends turned their backs on her. She lost the life she had worked so hard to build. Jean never married again. Without any children, grandchildren, or true friends, she could not enjoy her great wealth and passed away feeling very lonely. She kept her promise and never spoke about Mike to the police. She seemed to worry more about public perception than about what the police might discover. After 2 years of investigation, the police concluded that Arthur Kindred was taken by the Mexican Cortez cartel. He had opened a shelter for women in need, which many spouses of the cartel's lower members used to find refuge. Mike Shawmike sold the house he had shared with Sarah. The new couple who bought it was excited to discover a secret room. Mike made sure to show them how to access it carefully. Mike then moved to a new house closer to his sister, Carrie. This house featured a separate garage for 4 cars, and above it was an apartment he converted into an office for his graphic design work. Using some of the funds Sarah earned from her previous life, Mike was able to take the time to start his own business. He also hired a full-time housekeeper and nanny for his children, James, Jenny, and Cindy. Over time, Mrs. Knowles became like a grandmother to them. 5 years after Sarah vanished, Mike met Diane, a young single mother. Their relationship began with challenges as both had past issues to address. However, with commitment and understanding, they found love and joy together. Ironically, Mike ended up with 4 children. Diane's son Ryan, who was a year younger than Mike's son Jamie, developed feelings for Cindy when he returned from college and saw how much she had matured. But that's a different story. Additionally, DNA tests confirmed that Mike is the biological father of all 3 of his children. HM, Hitman. True to his word, HM was a professional. He never troubled Mike and his family again. During one of his trips to Mexico, he unexpectedly encountered someone he recognized. Sarah took some time to acclimate to the hot weather in Mexico. However, she soon gained popularity within a specific group of individuals. When she decided to retire at the age of 50, she had amassed 23 million Mexican pesos. At that time, this amount was equivalent to approximately 1.6 million Australian dollars. After navigating difficulties and living under the name Arthur had given her when he left, Sarah had largely lost track of her true identity by the time she retired. Hey, audience! If you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.